are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Daragh, this here's Shane.
Hello.
Two brothers talking all things rugby from the point of view of Leinster and Ireland. Now, it's a big show this week, episode 117.
Yep.
As we just had the opening two rounds of the Six Nations, we're going to be looking back on that second round, that all-climactic second round with a show-stopping, brilliant game between France and Ireland that was edged by the hosts pretty convincingly, but Ireland coming away with a losing bonus point. We'll dig into that game. We're going to dig into the game. Obviously, Italy were nilled by England, but we're also going to dig into the game in the Millennium Stadium, which was a 3-point narrow win for the hosts Wales, as home sides rule all in the Six Nations. So we'll be looking back on all of those games. That's going to be the bulk of the show, as always.
Absolutely, yeah. But we're also going to look back on round 2 of the Rugby Europe Championship, which has been going on side by side as well, and there were some thrilling games in that one, like well over 200 points scored between all three of the games. Russia hosted Spain and gave them a right scare in the opening game, and Georgia exercised some demons against the Dutch and put in 70 odd points against them, which was a bit of a blood sport for the middle game, and then a thriller as well out in Romania, where Romania managed to pit Portugal in a very, very high quality game out there.
Yeah, very impressive win for Romania. Changes the World Cup dynamics again. We'll dig into all of that stuff. We're also going to be looking ahead to the final qualification tournament now for the women's tournament, which takes place over the next couple of weeks. Just 3 remaining teams will compete for 1 spot. So we'll be taking a look at that, as well as the under-20 stuff, which yielded a couple of interesting results. Ireland winning away in France and Italy beating England 6-0 out in Treviso. That was quite an eyebrow-raising result. So we'll be looking back on the under-20 stuff as well. Yeah,
and then we're going to pivot on into club footy as well, starting in Europe. We're going to look at the action from the top couture, from the Premiership, some of the URC games that have been going on, and then we're going to look further afield and look to the MLR in the States and keep you up to date with that, as well as Japan Rugby League 1. And then we're going to preview Super Rugby as well, for Super Rugby Pacific starts this weekend, and we're going to take a look at the teams in that and how that competition is shaping up before we wrap up the show with the news of the week, as we do.
Absolutely, yes. And by the way, listen, we have an apology to make, some due diligence. We had shoddy audio, I believe, last week. I'm hopeful that some of the adjustments we've made are going to mitigate that problem, but yeah, you're right to point it out, and hopefully the audio is improved, and we'll be doing our best to get it as sharp as possible in our new little studio here. But minus some hitches, thanks for sticking with the show and watching it anyway. And if you do like the show, if you do enjoy our chat and our rugby content, please do subscribe. It always helps if you can. Share it with your friends and enter the comments section as well to chat about the rugby. We do enjoy getting a good conversation going here, and we do read them all. So if you have the means, if you're interested at all, comment down below, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. But without any more ado, I think we're going to move on.
Yeah, let's get into it. And it starts, as we were billing, with the Six Nations, and we had rounds 1 and 2 now in the books, and we're into that gap week as well. So no action this weekend for any of these teams. They get to sit on what they achieved in the opening 2 rounds. And last weekend we were treated to a few cracking games of rugby, to be honest. I really enjoyed the opener with Wales and Scotland in a tight, tense affair in Murrayfield, as it has been between these two, or in the Millennium Stadium, or Principality Stadium as it is now. But the hosts just edging it, as has been the trend in recent times with the crowds back. And then game of the tournament so far in Paris as well. France 30, Ireland 24, awesome game. And then obviously the obligatory blowout with England running in 33 points. Slightly there, Italy have managed to bring down the scoreline based on last year, but they didn't manage to score a point. They're the first team to get nilled in quite a while in the Six Nations. So we will talk about all of those games in order as well, but just a great weekend of rugby, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Six Nations going very, very strong. It's great to have it back, and the gap week comes in with France obviously in pole position, and all of the home nations taking defeat in the opening 2 weeks. Obviously, we're going to start at the very beginning in the Principality Stadium, as you rightly point out, in Cardiff on Saturday. It kicked off with a really tight wet weather game between Wales and Scotland that was edged by the hosts. 20 points to 17 to Wales. It was a scrappy game. It was a tense game. It was an interesting game in a lot of ways. and ends in some bitter disappointment for the Scots, who are left not really knowing where to turn.
Yeah.
And a great win for Wales, who are not going to be lying down anytime soon.
No, this is it. You can never write Wales completely off, and it was only their first home game, and the crowd was raucous, and it was a good atmosphere, and some of their key men who are very much key men in the context of all the injuries they were highlighting in week one really did step up in this one and played really well. I thought there was good leadership shown from some of the guys they wanted to show leadership, but then conversely from the Scottish side, you're going, where is the leadership? Where is the calm? There were a fair few errors. It was a wet weather game, which does excuse some of it, but just some of the key handling errors at key times that really scuppered some rhythm and some offensive stuff from Scotland was disappointing. It's now actually not since 1996 that Scotland have managed to win their opening 2 games of the tournament, so never in the Six Nations have they gone 2-2. And 2-0, I should say. They have gone 2-2, but it's momentum sapping. It's the same story as last year, but with the home and away fixtures reversed. But they back up a historic win against a top side in England and another Calcutta Cup with a disappointing unravelling against Wales. They can't seem to conquer the Millennium Stadium. The other stat we were highlighting last week, not since 2002 have they won in the Millennium Stadium or the Principality Stadium, so that's still something they've yet to manage, and it does set their campaign back a bit.
Yeah, it was probably a tale of a smart team against a not so smart team, and the matchup was interesting in that Scotland again they were very, very good for large parts. Bits of what they did were excellent. The defence was magnificent. It was unbreached. Apart from the maul try, they were stuffing them in defence. Wales is multi-phase like this. Wayne Pivac attacking Wales. This was a Warren Gatland Wales side, like latter era Warren Gatland Wales win. This game was in the wet weather, won by Nous and won by kicking game. But Scotland contained them, and then in bad moments, pretty consistently throughout the game, they gave up sloppy penalties, which allowed Wales to build up. It was mostly penalties on the defensive end. They came up with sloppy penalty after sloppy penalty. They were going in, they were competing unnecessarily, consistently trying to force turnovers. Like Finn Russell's yellow card towards the tail end. It was indicative and an example of what they were doing throughout the game, trying to force a turnover. If you freeze frame it and look out, there wasn't anything that dangerous. If Finn just lines up his man, he's probably going to tackle him, it's going to be fine, but he's shooting for a turnover that they don't need to shoot for. They're going for these Hail Mary plays on defence when their defence is playing great. They just need to focus on staying in shape, getting back on side, not giving up penalties. But consistently they let Wales in by giving away really sloppy penalties, losing their feet at the breakdown, going for turnovers that weren't there. And that was, for me, the tale of it. Wales gave up some penalties as well, but when Wales's penalties were good penalties. Wales were stretched. Scotland were testing them. They were getting guys in all over the place. They were coming up on angles, and every time that Wales were stretched, someone like an Adam Beard would come in and just put a hand in there or slow it up or do something, and then sometimes they'd have to concede the penalty, but theirs were always sapping Scottish momentum, whereas Scottish penalties were sapping their own momentum. And so it just felt like a bit of a silly performance from Scotland, and a smart enough one from Wales. And it was definitely aided quite a bit by the wet weather. It played out quite a bit like a kicking duel.
It did, and it was actually at that quite a high level kicking duel, as we were highlighting, between Finn, the axis of Finn Russell and Stewie Hogg on one side versus the axis of Dan Biggar and Liam Williams on the other, and there was a lot of play in the middle third, so a lot of it was decided by that, and there were good moments on either side. To be honest, all 4 of those players mentioned did have pretty sweet moments, but I think on balance, across the whole course of the 80 minutes, the Welsh duo were the ones that just edged it, not least because of the yellow card. It ended up that Finn threw in that hand, and also then Dan Biggar slotting into the pocket, which was a decision criticised at the time, but I thought it was actually dead on.
It was a consequence of what the Scottish defence was doing.
They weren't breaching it, even though they did have the extra man. They did try for a few phases and weren't going anywhere, and Dan Biggar, being the captain that he was, slotted back and slotted a kick in the rain.
They did have a penalty advantage.
They did, so that's where it is ultimately silly. But slotting that kick and getting it over, and then defending pretty gamely for the last stanza was very impressive from Wales, to be honest.
For sure, it started as it often does. The very first thing that happened is Scotland got a lovely offensive set going, and they were moving the ball really well. It was clean. They had runners coming from all angles. They were putting together great phases, and Wales were defending gamely, like you could see that they were game, and then Darcy Graham picks a sharp line off Ali Price and gets instantly stripped by Liam Williams. They go down the pitch through Owen Watkin and end up getting 3 points of their own. Actually, it should have been a yellow card really for Stuart Hogg, coming in with a deliberate knockdown of his own at the opening of that after Watkins' break. But that leads to a penalty. They take a 6-0 lead. And then actually from there, Scotland do start to impose themselves on the game.
The next 20 minutes of the game really looked like Scotland were the better team, and it was similar to what was playing out in Murrayfield last year, where there were protracted periods where Scotland looked the more composed, more physical and more organised team, but they didn't quite, like, they'd scored a lovely try. That Darcy Graham try was an absolute peach to get themselves onto the board. Like, nice little loop play with Finn, skip pass off the left hand and then back your in-form winger to just do some footwork and finish the try. 1v1, perfect. Like, they do look sharp in moments, but then you're right to point out it's just mitigated entirely, or kind of basically sabotaged entirely, by sloppy penalty count, by errors in general. I thought both locks, and considering their embarrassment of riches of locks, and guys like Skinner not involved but scoring great
Skinner was playing at 6 and he was anonymous, but Scott Cummings is the one who
scored a great try in provincial rugby, while the pair of locks that were on the field for them in this one both had pretty bad just drops in the multi-phase. That was, again, Scotland generating a bit of momentum, and once they did that, they were testing Wales, they were forcing Wales to give penalties away, but unless they just were dropping it cold and resetting the scrum.
I thought they were playing a pretty great game. It was always going to be tough playing offence in that weather. They did ultimately struggle to open up a really tough Welsh defence. I think they were probably there was just a lack really of collision winning and forward runners. One of the things that I would say as well is that it never looks the same without Sam Johnson. I mean, they're so eager at every opportunity to haul him out of there, and I just don't understand why. I think he has a great telepathy with Russell. He picks good lines off him, and I think they were sorely lacking that short, hard cut line to open up the defence and soften up. Like, they're so eager to get to the edge, but they were missing that hard cut line, and Hamish Watson did it once or twice in the second half, but it wasn't enough. They didn't get enough front foot going forward ball to actually generate stuff on offence. And then they were also a little wasteful on the free plays, which they got quite a few of, advantages. They never executed any of them. And while they were in that period of the game when they went from 6-0 down all the way to 11-6 up and then 14-9 up, and they were on top for pretty much throughout that period, they had a few more chances to score. They managed to put one try in. They needed to find another, and that's a criticism that you'd have to have. As I thought Russell played a really good game for much of it. In that period, he was getting them in the right areas of the field. He was making good decisions, but they weren't making the magic happen. They weren't getting their guys in space. They weren't opening Wales up. You got to give credit to Wales for that, because Wales
they were very sticky on the defence, and a few guys who had kind of a fire lit under them after the Dublin showing really did show up. I thought Beard as well, who in the absence of Alan Wynne-Jones has to step up in that row, did come to play this week. I thought it was a really good performance from him. The back row as well were dogged and there for the fight, all of them, to be honest, because that Scotland back row had been very impressive again in week 1 against England, and it was some task to try and defuse them, but they did manage to make it oh so scrappy, oh so bitty, and then ultimately edge it, which has been a dynamic of this particular fixture for a wee while. They are a bit of a monkey on Scotland's back now, and they can make that count in those pressure moments, in the last 10 minutes. They know that they can be the ones to just kind of put the ball in Scotland's court and rely on them to kind of,
and they came up with some huge plays as well. I mean, the other thing that, like, the difference between the teams, probably in a nutshell, like, Scotland had more to them offensively than Wales did. They were moving the ball cleaner, but during that sequence when Finn was off the pitch, Wales had a great defensive set that ended a big Dylan Lewis steal, an impact off the bench, but Scotland were going from side to side. It must have been about 10 or 12 phases. And Wales, where earlier in the game, they'd have been a bit stretched and they might have given away a penalty, they didn't give a penalty because they weren't pressured. And that's the thing that Scotland have to learn. I mean, so many cheap points went away and so many cheap positions on the field as well. They did it all over the place because they were impatiently trying to force turnovers. And Wales in that set, without Russell on the pitch, were defensively comfortable. They knew they weren't going to kick it, and they held their line, defended really well, and ended up getting the steal. And it was the same at the end. Jonathan Davis, awesome. It was probably, I might have made a comment or something doubting him because he's coming in for his 100 cap, but I wasn't sure about his form, etc. Like, that was a great veteran showing off the bench. It was all defence, but it was great, making reads, and then he makes the winning play on that counter up to turn the ball over.
Yeah,
like,
they love him over there. He is a veteran, and he's
awesome.
worthy of that. Congratulations to him on the caps as well. But it's awesome play. He'll be more delighted with that play, because that's what wins and loses matches. That's what these things often boil down to, is just one play like that. And to have a guy like that you can chuck in off the bench with that kind of experience really does help. So Wales played a great game at home and managed to get their campaign back on track with their first win. And as well as that, scupper ideas of Scottish Grand Slams or Triple Crowns and all of that is now gone.
It gets very tough, especially when they've trips to Dublin and a game against France still to go. It does get tough for Scotland. But no, you're right to credit Wales. I mean, it was a flashback to the World Cup. Like, you could see just the all-star quality of Biggar and Liam Williams, and there was a lot of people giving out about Hogg and Russell. Like, obviously Russell has to take the heat for that penalty. It was a really bad one to concede in a bad moment in the game. But actually, for much of that battle, like, it was as entertaining and high level a kicking duel in the wet as you're ever going to see.
There were spirals. Liam Williams had a 50-22 in it. That was a little scutter.
That led to Thomas's Francis try.
Key moments in the kicking game that were there. And even another kick that was so seminal was Biggar's attempt. It led to the game-ending kind of play, but the long-range kick from the angle that found the post, and then credit to Alex Cuthbert, who was in for his first cap for a while, for chasing up. The ball bounced kindly. He managed to gather it, set up a red zone drive, and then he himself came very close to getting over in the aftermath of that Russell knock-on. Just about repelled in the corner, but really good veteran stuff from him as well, because then from that set with Russell off the pitch, they managed to kind of put the squeeze on and edge the game there.
They did, but it was those middle of the game exchanges when I thought Biggar and Williams really did show their class. And to be fair, Williams right from the off, that strip of Darcy Graham. But like, Hogg was putting in these bullet low kicks that were really good, that would catch most teams out, and the positional play of Biggar and Williams were great. And then sometimes on the flip side, like, Biggar had the odd loose kick, and Russell's reading of the backfield was really good as well. So it was those two 10 and fullback tandems. Like, the Scots thoroughly outplayed their English counterparts in those jerseys. They touted Smith and Stewart. But they did not outplay. Like, they were very close. It was ding dong, but Biggar and Liam Williams showed and proved why they're world class players, and why it's just so naive to write Wales off as a bad. Like, there's a lot of loose chat that goes around about Wales not being a good team. They have very, very good players, and all of these 5 teams in this championship are razor thin apart. And while Wales can look a little loose and bad on their off days, they have real class and quality, and they showed it in the wet in Cardiff. I think they're it's not quite the Wayne Pivac team of last year. It's a little more Warren Gatlin's Wales. But in the West, they had the wide nets.
It's a factor with, I think it's still a COVID protocol, but the Millennium Stadium's roof can't be closed. So sometimes in one or two of those games, you end up on the dry track and you get more of Pivac's Wales. But we don't have that this year at all. And it is these are the February games in the Six Nations. So it has been a wet one. It had been wet in Paris and wet in thing, and it would be wet in Cardiff as well. So they managed to play the conditions and play the game very, very well and get themselves on the board for this year.
Yeah, awesome job to Wales. Congratulations to them. It was a scrappy enough but very compelling game of rugby that did flow on quite nicely. So massive congrats to Wales. But we're going to move on now to what was the main event, certainly after the curtain raiser. A huge, compelling game between what was arguably, going into this match, two of the form sides in World Rugby. Some were saying the two form sides in World Rugby. It was always going to be a big occasion, and it's great. Like, it's heartbreaking for us in one sense, but it's great, really, when the big game delivers.
It is,
and produces just a brilliant, compelling,
certainly game of the tournament so far.
Fantastic game of rugby between Ireland and France. It did finish on the side of Les Bleus, 30 points to 24 in Paris. It was... well, sure, look.
To be honest, when we were 10-0 down 6 minutes in, I might have taken that. Losing bonus points, that didn't seem likely.
It was pulsating, it was brilliant, France were outstanding. It started like the very beginning of the game started with just this brilliant sequence from France. Ireland, they kick it off to Ireland, and the game starts as it means to go on, in that Ireland claim the restart. And instantly the ruck is hounded. It's Alderett who comes in and just hits it like a dead ruck, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 more Irish players are in. The ferocity that France
and
brought
the
from
other side
off.
is that there's no blocker on Gibson Park's ensuing kick because they're in the ruck in that scrap, and then he goes high and it's short and it goes out, and there's a Mac Hansen kind of goes up and then kind of retreats back waiting for the line out, doesn't realise that Dupont has his hands on the ball.
Yeah, it was
and
interesting.
He's going to go.
You looked at it back and you think as soon as it happens, that was the plan. But actually it was a little more freeform than that, in that the kick went out and Dupont was there and the ball just takes a bounce off the top of it and goes right to him. He's like, ho ho ho, and he looks up and Ntamack calls for it and he passes it, and Jaminet has his back turned. Like, this is why I'm not sure it was a plan. Jaminet's not even looking. He's kind of away with the fairies, and then he looks up and sees Ntamack has it and works his hole off to run a tracking line outside of Villiers, that they flash it to the open side, and he works his hole off, opens up that space on the outside, and then allows Villiers to make a cut line, gain a bit of ground, and instantly they have Ireland disoriented. I mean, if you watch it back, like, it's the more things change, the more they stay the same, in the sense that it was the classic one. It wasn't a line out, but it was a throw in, and it was, you work it to the open side, and Ireland come beelining for that side, and then all of a sudden you move it right back, sweeping across the pitch, and Gary Ringrose, Bundy Aki, Josh van der Fleer, Ireland's 3 main midfield defenders, were all trapped on the right edge with Pinot and Villiers, and then back it was Conan and Daragh trying to fill in as centres to cover Ntamack and Antonio on the previous play. It was a good tackle by Conan on Antonio. They overlapped on the outside, they had numbers, and he fed Antonio. Conan just gets him, but they have huge momentum, and then they come up with they go again off the edge, and Daragh and Conan are too slow to fold. Conan's just made one tackle, he's not sure where he should be. Ntamack gets on his outside and just pops the little ball in over Dara's head for Dupont to score. They have Ireland chasing shadows on that same formula, sweep it to one side, come back across the other, incision, favourable matchups, try. Like, it was a brilliant start to the game from them. It was they caught us cold again.
They did, and then backed it up with another free exit, and then a very quick fire 3-pointer that was again born of physicality, and it was just a marker very much laid down from early on. That the rucks were monstrous. The collision zone was huge. Guys like Antonio were making themselves felt in every collision on either side of the ball, and Ireland were disoriented, and they desperately needed the score that they did get, which was just off the kickoff, off that 3-pointer, which was credit to Joey Carberry, absolutely on the money as a kickoff, and massive credit to Mac Hansen, 2 weeks in a row grabbing spectacular scores and making stuff happen. He's managed to manage that skill brilliantly. An amazing catch on full tilt and kind of inside as well, managed to avoid being blocked, and another sweet strike from Joey Carberry to convert that score to bring it back to 10-7 was key.
The kickoff, that couldn't be more perfect, and he had a few of them, but that one was just a peach, right over the pod of forwards, that just in an unrealistic position for the forward pod to catch, leaving Pinot and Jaminet uncertain, and then Mac Hansen running into that space and plucking it. It was great. Love a cheap score like that.
Desperately needed a cheap score in France in that opening half, because
but what played out in that half for me was a Sean Edwards masterclass. I mean, this was, I had a bad feeling listening to him talk, because this man has done this to Ireland in particular so many times in the past, and he you could hear in his voice, and there was a focus and a drive.
Nothing gets him giddier than having like a well-touted brand new offense that's high flying come to town and have to take on your team. He just loves that so much. So he was giddy with excitement to try and shut us down, and boy did he.
I mean, the 10 points that came, like, obviously it's born of the physicality, but again there was the little spy of Dupont flying on the edge. He's the guy who puts Daragh under pressure for the drop, and then they go down the field, and that's where they get the penalty from. But it proceeds like that. I thought Gail Fiku as well. What a weapon for Edwards this guy is, because he's got such a read on the game. He was shutting down things. He tortured Daragh on another play, actually flew up from the 13 channel and caused another spill by Daragh. And the other two really, from a defensive point of view and a physicality point of view, Antonio and Willemse were extraordinary. They really were extraordinary. I mean, there was one in particular when Ireland were setting a maul up. It was a clean line-out ball, and Ireland were setting a maul up. And just as they were setting it up, Willemse comes in there, barnstorms, destroys them all, sends a guy to the floor, holds his feet and gets a jackal. And he's just single-handedly sent the high-flying Irish pack flying in different directions. I mean, he was Like, you're starting to think he's one that South Africa let go, and as good as South African pack is, like, this guy's he's playing at a very, very high level right now.
For the last couple of years he has been. He's very, very powerful and now dynamic with it. And they're all a little bit fitter than they had been. They're more focused as a team, as a collective. But that first half ultimately just was them edging away. And they did kick threes. Maybe they could have buried the game sooner if they'd put their foot in the throat and kicked the corner and gone with the likes of Willem. So you don't know. But they did manage to still just put the squeeze on Ireland and make the pack look very
The funny thing is, it wasn't the offense. Like, it really
No,
wasn't.
it
And
wasn't.
outside of that opening power play set, it was mostly the defense. They had one good offensive set towards the tail end of the half, which actually began with Aldred running through Josh van der Fleer. It was a rough day for the whole Leinster back row, who we obviously love and are great and did hustle hard still throughout the day, but it was a tough day for them. And Aldred just trucks through van der Fleer like he's not there, and that sets up a powerful sequence that ends in they squeeze the Irish defence in, and then Dupont does that lovely skip pass out to the right wing to Pinot. They cut their way through, that Mofana finds his way on the edge, and ultimately that yields an offside penalty that they kick over. But the rest of their penalties were coming from scrums and defence. And that's actually...
And just turnovers in general coming from that. You think Villiers just ragdolling poor Hugo out over the touchline, and all manner of 1v1 matchups being won across the park.
With energy, fire, direction. They were ready to do war in front of their fans, and they really did have Ireland completely squeezed under the pump. I mean, after 20 minutes or so, Ireland were still trying steadfastly to do some stuff on offence in that opening 20 minutes. Like, Conan got his way to the edge. They were trying to move the ball. It was just a little futile because they were losing collisions. They were getting smacked. France were getting the read on where they were going. And even just without Sexton there, it lacked that same direction, that same speed and ability to fold and bring width. And they were eating it alive. And after about 20 minutes, you could see Ireland became a kicking offence. And it stopped. They sat back in the pocket, and they basically couldn't really get things going. And there was actually a sad moment as well when they worked a good first phase through Bundy Aki. They managed to isolate Aki 1-on-1 v Entomac, and Aki trucked him, and they got quick momentum. And then off the second phase, it was a hit up, just one out from Gibson Park, and then the third phase was a hit up, one out from Gibson Park that was stolen by Gelange, and that was they're disoriented, they're breaking. This is bad stuff going on. France have them completely reeling, and that was the tail of that first half. I mean, it could have been any score. They were all over Ireland. They really were beating the crap out of them.
They were, and thank goodness it didn't end with the halftime whistle, because actually the first score of the second half came from another penalty. They managed
that
to
was
push
a cheap enough one.
It was a bit harsh. I think it was Conway was pinned, wasn't it?
It was for being offside.
It was a little harsh on him, but it's still, the net result was the same. Jaminet slotting it from an acute angle, and then 22-7. But from there, a lovely patch of play that showed resilience and defiance, and a bit of the improvements that we know this Ireland side have made. When you even just look back on the last time they've visited Paris, this France team have been a bit of a bogey team for this Ireland team for the last 3 years. It's 0-3 in the last 3 years against them, including a trip to Paris that we had notions of winning a tournament with, and got absolutely pumped. And the first half looked similar. The opening stanzas looked similar, where we're like, oh no. But the response was worse in that previous game than it was here. And like, even down to things like the performance of Joey Carbery, you're right to say, like, Sexton does give a little bit more direction, sure, but I thought he was very good. I thought he was flat to the line.
No,
and considering, because Whiskey, like, the pack were getting monstered, and the ruck speed was not as quick as it was against Wales, which it was never going to be because that was lightning, but it was just also inconsistent because they were France were barnstorming into seemingly dead rucks and hitting them with 2 or 3 men and blasting them back open again, and like, people were trying to time runs off it, and you didn't know when Whiskey was going to be able to wrestle it away. And Carbery actually executed most things very, very well, had a very calm, assured performance.
And like, the only reason I was highlighting the absence of Sexton is just because when Sexton's there, he's sort of the communicator in chief, where he barks at the pack and gets them into position, and they're very quick to fold into position when Sexton's there. And like, obviously it's just different when you're losing collisions, and that's certainly a part of it. But I thought that, Carbery's not that kind of communicator, and the pack needed to give him a dig out. And in the first half, it wasn't working,
happening.
And it was sloppy, and Gael Ficou and the French pack were just destroying them on the defensive end. So it was tough for him. But no, you're right. He stayed wonderfully composed, and the halftime adjustments that Ireland made were great. I mean, first of all, just the opening score that they got. The hustle from Andrew Porter, who just never stopped working. I mean, he was getting beaten up at the scrum. That powerful right-hand side of the scrum with Antonio and Willemse up against Andrew Porter and a lock in Tadhg Byrne, like that's a problem that Ireland are going to have to look at for these big packs. He can't scrummage in the lock position. He's a back row forward, and I think Big Ian Henderson would have been the wiser call because of that, because you could just see there was no power coming from the engine room. So Porter was getting beaten up, not winning his battles, and he comes in with a brilliant jackal steal off the kick out. They go to the corner totally correctly and get a nice cheap maul try. It was actually great work from James Ryan and Daragh off that line out to open up the space for Josh van der Fleer, and it's a nice
Fleer did well to take it as well. Another defiant, because he had been beaten up as well in a few contacts, but a bit of defiance and a bit of speed and hustle, which is what it's always got to be about against the big teams, is a bit of speed and hustle in those moments. And grabbed a very quick try and then came again.
Yeah, what I loved was the next sequence. That was my favourite because it showed the adjustment. They take the restart, and France have been flying up, and Furlong and these guys have no space, and so they go Carberry basically sitting in the pocket, ready to kick an exit seemingly, takes the ball, and he has the usual pot of forwards instead of on his inside, on his outside, and he feeds Tadhg Furlong. He's got a forward either side, and they're way deep off the line, and Furlong brilliantly, like for a forward to just be as savvy, as smart as he is in terms of straightening the line and committing defenders, just runs it plays it perfectly. But I just loved that they adjusted enough to sit deep and negate the French blitz defence getting in their faces, sit really deep, and the French defence was a little uncoordinated, and it was actually Aldred who made the mistake to bite in on the outside man from Furlong, and he, as he always does, times the ball out the back to perfection, and then all of a sudden Hugo Keenan is through a hole 40 metres down the field, and Ireland are going again, and they get a penalty which they can then move down the field, and it generates the next score, which is brilliant work. They get a penalty, rightly go to the corner, and then work really well off the edge, and ends up with Whiskey crashing over from Willemse. But it started with that wonderful break, brilliant bit of adjustment to give Ireland the front foot, and I just thought it was an example of smart, excellent rugby from us.
Credit the coaching ticket at half time, making adjustments, as well as the team for coming out and executing them. And Ireland, as you kind of knew they would have a purple patch, but to make it count on the scoreboard as much as they did was very impressive. Managed to get it back to a 1-point game at one point before France managed to steady the ship.
I'd give a shout out as well, the Sheehan carry before Gibson Park's thing. He sucks in 3 defenders.
Sheehan actually did great coming on early, like that was his longest amount of time on the pitch in a top level game, because Kelleher had to go off early enough. But really, really good performance throughout the game, including that nice bit of carrying in that sequence. Great
carry, and then there was a super clean out from Conan as well that just opened up the space. He grabbed Aldred basically and flung him over the ruck, and Conan was a guy who struggled in the game as well, but it just left Willemse one-on-one with Whiskey and with James Ryan coming barreling on his outside.
There were actually 2 lads folding around, and he just kind of he froze and stepped off, and he was exposed. And there was also actually 3 guys hit the previous ruck, which was probably not wise collectively.
That was a result of Sheehan and his carry sucking them all in.
They were just a bit discombobulated by it, which is what good collision winning will do, and then nice decision making from your halfback to be able to execute a little snipe like that. It was great. It was already delivering on a great game. You could feel the murmurs in the crowd. It was a nervy time then at that point in the game, but the French did respond.
The next thing that happened was the bomb squad, and it's close to a bomb squad itself from the French, I must say. But Roman Taufi Fanua comes in and instantly just shakes up
for
the
Woki
game
as well. Flaman's a good player, but it was just
Taufi Fanua. The very next thing that happens, Ireland have an exit, and they're just setting up a ruck, and then he comes in and hits that dead ruck like they've been doing all day, and again skittles, and it's actually James Ryan's toe boots the ball out of the ruck. Away they go, scoop it up, and then Cyril By sits down Tadhg Byrne, sits down Peter O'Mahony, and crashes over for just
sits down Angus Gardner as well. Sits down 3 people in that particular collision.
Mighty physical try, and a great response from France. You could just feel the energy. I thought France were still the better team. I thought the introduction of that bomb squad helped them quite a bit. But it was a pulsating last quarter then. I mean, it was up and down. Ireland were still coping.
They were still firing some shots, and the French were starting to fatigue a bit towards as the 70-minute mark came, and Ireland looked maybe the slightly fitter team, which is I suppose the trade-off when you have more mass, that your cardio is probably a little bit lessened for it on your team. But Ireland did look like they had an engine to go for it. But a few key moments, Tadhg Byrne's great 50-22 not executed off the back of.
What a play though from Francois Cross, who by the way, like quietly awesome.
Awesome,
In the first half, he had a brilliant tackle and jackal as well. Like, he was getting through it. He doesn't get nearly enough credit as part of this French pack, but like, he was the shining light, even of all your Aldrits and your Gélanges. Cross was doing brilliant things, and to get up there and just poach that line out after the 50-22
was near perfect.
Such a huge play, just a
colossal.
colossal.
It was colossal as well in the context of Ireland, when they did get the penalty that they ultimately kicked, decided not to go to the corner, and that was like, because the previous still on the mind. It was James Ryan, he nicked it off, and then James Ryan's making the call. Do I want to go for it again? And maybe not is the answer. Like, collectively, I thought they played a very smart game, Ireland, but that was on balance a dumb decision, kicking the 3-pointer that gets it back to a 3-point game. So only a draw really is what you're playing for. You still have to go for a try. And it's not like we were citing it even in autumn when we did beat the All Blacks, that when the All Blacks relented and didn't score their try and then ended up kicking a 3-pointer, that before he'd even kicked the conversion or kicked the 3-pointer over, the fields of Athenry was reverberating around the stadium as the whole crowd knows that's not a wise call. And it was the same here. 2 minutes later after that 3-pointer, the Marseillaise.
It was about 30 seconds later the Marseillaise breaks out, and Ireland never get close to being back in that position again. It's sort of like, just the way the game was going, it was taking a lot of work to get that red zone.
The other side of it is, like, if they execute it, even if they don't convert and it's a miss, they bank a 4-try bonus point if they score a try off that, even if they don't make the conversion. So it was not really clear decision making, but it was the 73rd minute, and they had been beaten up for large parts of it, and guys like Peter O'Mahony had come in and gone straight off because of that collision with Cyril Bay, and it was just a little bit strained on the leadership. But those are the moments that it comes down to, and France ultimately would go on to be deserving winners from there.
Well, it was a great response to that sequence, because it was a good sequence from Ireland that led to that penalty. They were getting good momentum. France give up the pen. Like, it was definitely good, and that was the moment to go to the corner. They had France reeling a little bit, and when they didn't do that, the response from France was predictably brilliant. It was probably their third really excellent offensive sequence of the game. You had the try to open the game, the one that led to the 3-pointer with the Dupont pass to Pinot towards the tail end of the first half, and then you had this one which begins with Gail Ficou again, the master of everything, the little chip over the top that's regathered, and then from there they actually just do a brilliant job of just pumping down the same channel, and it's like ruck avoidance. That always causes Ireland problems, but it's literally they work in about 5 metres of space. Powerful carry before I'm down, I'm offloading it, powerful carry, and again it's poor Daragh who relents, and he just had a really tough day and ended up on the wrong side.
Keep stepping up and getting up and going in for collisions, but he lost nearly every one of them.
He ended up on the wrong side of the ruck, not moving, gets called, and then instantly from that barrage down one channel they flash it out and they've numbers, and Jaminet cuts a beautiful line, and you think for all money, like, it's Cian Healy in front of him who he burns effortlessly, and Sheehan running around him, like, it's just a try. It looks for all money like a try, and Dan Sheehan
and what a play. That's the kind of plays that I was highlighting. Bowden Barrett's very good at those plays. But Bowden Barrett. He has Bowden Barrett speed at his disposal. But he was doing that for a few things. That little hug tackle that wraps you around.
I don't think I watched it back. There was people saying it should have been awarded. I don't think it was a try. I
think it was a good bear hug. It's a very technical. It's a very tough skill to do on the run and to cover the ground first to make it there for Jaminet, but also to be able to belly roll him up and then hold him up there as well. Yeah, awesome play, and they kicked 3 off, and that was the play that ultimately secured a point from this fixture.
Yeah, Dan Sheehan saves the day with that. I frankly, I'm not sure how much I approve of France going for 3 in that position.
No, I don't think it's good savvy kind of tournament macro tournament
also
play.
Opened up potentially a door for Ireland. Like, they had Ireland on reeling, and it opened up a door for Ireland to still win the game.
True.
Which they probably shouldn't have been in at that stage after that offensive set. But it was compelling throughout. I mean, there was constantly great plays either side. The better side won. I think, like, there were a few breakout performances. I think Weenie Antonio, the fact that Mohamed Houas was being picked over him at any stage was
criminal, to be honest.
But he's taken it to a new level.
151 kgs of him. He's a monster.
Entering that upper echelon of tight head with Malherbe.
Here's a question. Like, even with those Springboks that are mighty, have I ever seen a collective, like, as good a display from starting props? Like, just a prop display than this game. Like,
all four of them.
You had Porter making steals despite losing his scrum battle. Cyril Bay with his awesome try. Antonio and Furlong making tight head play look just revolutionary.
Furlong's second half was extraordinary. Yeah, like, that was an example of when world class players show that they're world class. Because when you're getting beaten up, Like it's all well and good when you're playing against teams who are physically dominant, but for him to come back strong, and particularly in the sequence in the run up to Gibson Park's try, like off that line out, he had a monster carry as well, where I think he sat down. I think it was Julian Marchand just sat him down and then bustled his way through. Like, he was so instrumental. He had so many touches in that whole sequence that led up to that Gibson Park try. It was just class personified. I mean, I thought he was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. And Zero Boy impressed the hell out of me all day long, obviously. And then Antonio, you're right to point out too. Yeah, no, it was top level stuff in this game. It really was. And I saw a few comments from kind of Kiwi people watching on it, particularly saying it looks like World Cup final level intensity out there in Paris. And it's not wrong. It was definitely very intense. By far the most intense game we've seen so far in this year's tournament. And it looked like the form sides going in, which is what it was billed as, and the home side gets the win, which has been a theme. It is in those fine margins. It does give you that extra bit of energy, but I thought the fight back from Ireland was what made it the great game that it ultimately was, because that was a thrilling comeback and it led to a thrilling end as well, and just unfortunate for us to end up on the wrong side of it, but I'll take it, to be honest. I will.
Oh, it was big. It was big. I mean, the big challenge from France, because France are looking all kinds of legit now, aren't they? That was a superb performance, and the test for them, as the test was for us, the test for them is now to go and replicate it on the road, because it was reliant on a lot of energy, and when they lost that energy, their size counted against them.
Yes.
Because they were a little flat-footed, and you could see Ireland were able to make breaks. They actually had some kind of speed advantages on the inside.
Yes, particularly the forward pack.
Yeah, exactly. And so sides like Scotland and Wales could cause them problems if they don't bring that same marauding Sean Edwards energy, which they're going to need to open these teams up. So to deliver that at home in front of a raucous Parisian crowd is one thing, but actually to go over and do it away in Murrayfield,
that's part two of their
challenge.
Campaign. They've had the first two rounds at home, and they are sitting atop the table with it.
They've got to win this tournament. They've got to win.
They put themselves in great position
that
to do
team
it now.
Playing like that, nobody's playing close to that level, apart from maybe Ireland. But they beat them away. Ireland. They've seen off that challenge. Yeah. They haven't won anything.
They have England at home on the last day. They have it's those two. It's the Welsh and Scottish problems that they need to solve now.
They've got to go and win this tournament. France. They put themselves in the position. They got to go do it. And that's the challenge for them. Frankly, I'm not sure if I bet against them. I think I backed them. I think they look hungry as hell.
You think it might be time?
I think it might be time. Yeah, I think they're winning me over.
They look good. All right. They definitely look good. So congratulations to France. Les Bleus absolutely dominant in that, but. Les Verts with a few shots fired, I'll take that one. It was a thrilling game of the tournament so far. Great stuff. But there was another game, and we will do due diligence and report on it now. For England took to Rome to take on the Italians out in the Stadio Olimpico, and it ended in a kind of an underwhelming 33-0, I guess, from England's new offence point of view, but it was a result never in doubt. But a few good scores and then some squandered stuff, but the best thing about it from an England point of view is the clean sheet. The nil on the other side is the first time in 30 games of Six Nations action that any side has managed to nil anyone else.
It's what a fast start can get you against Italy. Yeah. Like, if you start slow, they'll kick a 3 and pretend they're in the game. As you're right,
which I think that is more criminal. To be honest, I'm going to congratulate Italy on their nil, because that's what I want for them. I think they kept going for it. They had many offensive sequences that ultimately didn't yield anything, but nil is a better scoreline for Italy to end on than 3. Because 3 is wrong. 3 is wrong.
There's a school of thought that they should have just kicked a 3 towards the tail end of the game
to not be nilled. No, absolutely not. They need to score tries. Their only hope to get any table point is to score 4 of the things. It's very unlikely, but they need to go for it every single time. A 3-pointer is worth nothing. Because England was a misfiring offense that's kind of finding its feet. Still ran in 5 tries against them, so you're gonna
Italy in the second half of this game, which was bookended by 2 English tries, but they had 71% territory. And England conceded 12 penalties. They owned the ball. They basically spent that whole half running the gambit of their playbooks. They tried trick plays at the front of lineouts. They tried mauls. They tried going out wide and finding seams out there, and it was futile every time.
Yes.
They were completely outmatched physically now. England were mean and strong, and England's forward.
Actually, Itoje at 6 was seemed a bit like not playing fair.
I like the toe.
No, I know. It's very good from an England point of view.
I know they like Laws in that position, and that might revert to that when he comes back. But in the interim,
he's such a big enforcer unit for them, and he gets through a boatload of work. He was a nightmare.
He looks free in that position, not having two locks in front of him and two big locks in Yules and Ezekwe who were doing good grunt work. They told you he was just free to go out there and make plays, and that's what he did all day. And
so many offensive.
I didn't hate the
sets
balance on it. I thought Dombrant was great as well. They basically got to run defensive drills, forward pack for the second half, and they ran them pretty well. They had some good jackal steals. Dombrant, I thought, was excellent in that area.
He was, and Marcus Smith, who grabbed the opening try with a nice bit of footwork to link with
getting himself on the board.
He is getting himself on the board, which is what he's been doing for Quins. Played very well. Was worthy of his man of the match award that he was given. He also became the first person to beat 6 defenders first out half, English fly half, to beat 6 defenders in a single game since Johnny Wilkinson managed to beat them. Beat 8 defenders, I think he in 2002. So more than 6 defenders beaten by the magic footwork of Marcus Smith. He was causing problems out there for Italy at times, and he played quite a good assured game, kicked his goals.
He caught the wingers out twice. It was the same winger, Maury, on the right wing. Caught him out twice with the flat pass.
Lovely pass for Elliot Daly's bonus point try, actually.
And then the opening try that he scored was the same thing. I mean, Maury was he was angry at his inside man despite being just totally out of position himself. He was running up and biting in and yelling at his inside man, hey. And it's like, man, your winger, your guy's over here, and sure enough, Smith just puts the ball beautifully to Max Malins and then gets it back for a lovely score. I liked what Smith was doing. I thought the offense, it's certainly new, it's certainly different from what they were doing. They're looking to find the edge a lot more. They're looking to stretch defences a lot more. I think they're leaning more than they ever used to in the old offense on the killer pass of a guy like Smith and people taking lines off him, but also just his ability.
A guy like Smith and a guy like Slade, who they have in there as well. So it's just a different balance to their centre pairingship. And actually, they did have what you were calling for, which was Slade Marchand in the midfield this time around. Yeah, and
Marchand didn't go too well. He didn't go as well as I'd hoped.
He didn't go that well in week 1 either. I don't know if his form is quite where it was last year, because last year he was playing some beautiful footy, but the reports are obviously Tuolagi back in the squad now this week, so it could change everything back to that mode again.
Well, the only criticism that I'd have is that the forward pods that are such a good part of, they're similar to what Ireland are doing, but we're always such a good part of what England were bringing under Eddie Jones. They were sloppy in this game. They were going one out. They not one out, but just by themselves. They were finding themselves by themselves with maybe just a back on their shoulder. They weren't folding into that kind of great shape that allows Smith to pick from a myriad options. It was very much more about speed, winning one-on-one matchups, recycling and going again. And as such, the ball protection just wasn't great. Lucchesi got a good couple of steals on them. The ball coming out the back of the breakdown for both Youngs and Randall was consistently messy.
Youngs' first contribution at 50 odd minutes was to fumble one at the base of the ruck.
But it was born of just they weren't cleaning well. The protection, the ball protection was not there.
That is the criticism of this young team, is that the pack is a little disjointed, as well as the back line being a little disjointed, and just collectively then it leads to things like inaccurate ruck cleanouts, and it's little micro moments that just mean that you don't have the extra half a second that you do want, and you can generate. They have the power to generate this if they can just tidy up a few areas, I think. But it was still a very useful game for the likes of Marcus Smith, for just minutes for a lot of new combinations and a lot of new guys out there.
No question. But I would say that if they have games now coming up against Ireland and France, obviously Wales as well in the next game. But if they don't shape up in terms of their ball protection, looking at what Sean Edwards was doing, but even what Ireland were doing as a response, they're going to get eaten alive. They're not going to be able to get quick ball. They're not going to be able to recycle it. Smith is going to get no service.
True.
Their biggest work on is ball protection at the moment, because it's a bit sloppy.
It is.
Even though when they do get clean ball, they're finding tries pretty well. And
their passing is still good. Their wingers still look dangerous. Actually, on the left wing there, Bristol man Malins had a very, very nice game. Obviously linked well with Smith there for the opening try. Also had a few lovely touches in the Sinclair try that was the ultimately the last try, which was I think it was from a Leonardo Marin drop. Marin drop. He had a very tough game off the bench at 23. A few negative plays, including that just dropped cold.
But that try was coming. That try, I could see, everyone could see that try coming a miles away, as England were 26-0 up. I think they were hammering and hammering, and you knew they weren't going to get in, and then they'd do something silly and England would get in, and that looked to be the shape of the game in that second half.
But the way it ultimately came was from a nice Malins line and then a nice little offload. So a few good offensive instincts displayed. And speaking of offensive instincts, Jamie George starts for this team.
So much.
He should. Because
awesome.
the other thing was Luke Cowan-Dickin came in and then immediately made a breakdown steal, which is what is great use for him off the bench. But I just think the balance is so much better. He showed why. He scored a nice tight try to get them going early on, as well as then a lovely
winger
finish with actually front row union tip of the hat, because Ellis Genge with an absolutely sumptuous left-handed pass to him, and then expertly finished by the winger Jamie George. And
even the scrum, especially after Sinclair came on, but at the start of the second half, they monstered the Italian scrum 3 or 4 times to set up the bonus point try.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think Jamie George, not only a starter in this team, a fulcung member of this team,
a contender
part
for
of
captain. I would
part
argue.
Of the core.
Yeah,
I think he's part of the core. He's world class, really excellent. I think he's a joy to watch. He's got wonderful footballing skills. He matches.
He can be a pivot for that offensive system. He's scalped Britzes out there in the old Sarries mould of Sarries hookers, just playing out half out there, or like what Tadhg Furlong's bringing to Ireland, where you have a ball playing front row unit like that who just you have to respect his carry, so it opens options up away from him. And then the balance of having a guy like Cowan-Dickie, who's an all-pro, who's a lion as well, to come in off the bench, and he's a bit more stocky. He will interfere with those breakdowns, give you a different look in the second half. I just think
something off the bench.
The balance looks better.
100% it's better. How this is a debate is kind of beyond me. I really the of all of the cuts that Eddie Jones has made, none made less sense than Jamie George, and I'm glad he's now back in the fold because
he's too good. He's too good to ignore.
He's been ignored for ages, and then they finally give him a start, and he goes and scores 2 tries because he's Jamie George. This guy is awesome. Don't waste your awesome resources, Eddie.
That is the main thing for England is always that little caveat. But a few little tips of the hat. Ben Youngs made 114 caps, which equals the record for Test caps for England. So congratulations. I think it was Jason Leonard's record before then. And actually another tip of the cap to Ellis Genge for the Fair Play Award, because actually Sebastian Negri, who has just been off with a long-term injury, came into the game off the bench and got himself cracked and knocked out fairly early on. He was trying to get stuck in, trying to be physical, got laid out, and it was actually Ellis Genge was the first person to come to his aid. Apparently he'd been choking or struggling to breathe, and Ellis Genge was straight over to treat him, and Negri was giving him a shout out on Twitter and thanking him for it. So good to see classy moments. Sometimes we go in on the English forwards for sometimes some scumbaggery and skullduggery, but it's nice to see just classy moments like that from Ellis Genge, who had a great game as well all round.
Classy all over the park was Ellis Genge. It was brilliant from England. Job done. I mean, people were giving out that it wasn't more. There's certainly the second half of 12 penalties conceded, disjointedness, lack of ball protection, knock-ons, very comfortable defending and kicking. It wasn't great, but nevertheless, I think they're in a good position with some work-ons, and they still have the capacity to be an excellent team. So we'll see how that progresses. From an Italian point of view, there's again not too much to unpack here. They were outmatched. They tried their best. But gee whiz, they didn't have anything against what England were bringing in the tight. And that's really this is the concern I have with Kieran Crowley. Frankly, is even though I didn't like what they were I think I preferred what they were doing under Franco Smith.
Where they were at least scoring tries in every game.
Their defense was a pain, and it was every week we were just talking about the defense. And of course, it's difficult to get the balance right, but. They're a bit more depressing to watch. They're kind of a bit like Benetton out there, and that they're hurdy-durdy and they can keep the score down for periods. And this might be their MO for this whole tournament is not quite as bad on the opposite end of the scoreboard as they were last year. But that try a game that they were getting might be gone as well, because at the moment the offense is very messy.
Like I say, like Benetton, the big frustration a lot of the time is they have these forwards, they can be scrappy, but got razzle-dazzle players like Monty Ioane just don't get into the game anywhere near enough, and when they do, good things happen. In fact,
the little chaos chip from Garbisi
he gathered up the thing, and that led to their closest point of scoring a try when they flashed it out to the side, and the skip pass was a little short, and he had to come in, the winger, and that allowed Marcus Smith to come in and make a great try-saving tackle again. Marcus Smith showing defensive chops as well, but that was the moment that they came closest to unpicking England, and it came from just getting Monty Ioane on the ball on the edge. finish. But like I think he needs to be roaming a bit more like a Corabetti as well. They need to be hitting him short, hitting him long. Like they need to just get more of their razzle. And they have young half. They have Varney and Garbisi, who were the excitement machines last year.
Varney has been
awful,
atrocious.
He's been awful. But part of that is the Benetton system, where the forwards are a little slower to fold around the corner, and the offensive shape isn't quite as ambitious as what Franco Smith was trying to get them to do, with pods out here and here, and trying to get passes out. And yes, sometimes the passing was inaccurate, and they'd lose like 30 meters of ground in one fell swoop. But that was part of the problem. But the balance is always tough, and they're always outgunned. So the disappointing side is nil. First side to get nilled in 30 odd games, and they were the last side as well.
But you reject wholly the notion that it would be better if it was 33-3.
I think nil, as far as Italy are concerned, is a superior score, a score to be more proud of than 3, 6, 9 or 12. Because if you're kicking 3-pointers against England,
12 could be 2 tries.
No, 12 could be 2, and 12 if it were 2 tries is a better score. But if it's 4 kicks, it's just dead wrong. Because England on an off offensive day still managed 33 points against you. It's just never going to be enough.
We are really clutching for straws when it comes to intrigue for the Italians.
No, indeed. Can they score? Can they get anything off? It's tough. It is tough. And well done, England. You get through that. Like it's tough enough for the tier 1 side in that capacity to try and get up for the game and try and do things accurately. And they did. They managed to see them off well, and it was a good defensive exercise for them. Yeah,
no question. Listen, that wrapped up round 2 of the Six Nations, and a great couple of weeks it was. That high intense 2-week block has come to an end, and it has left the table in this condition. So France, obviously 2-0, the only perfect team left in the competition. They have 9 points for their troubles. England takes second place with 6 points. Again, things razor tight. 1-1 are England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. Wales on the bottom after their bad showing against Ireland, just the 4 points. Scotland with 5, Ireland with 6, England with 6, and then France up atop again with 9. That's the meaty table as it is, and then we're also going to be back next week to preview next week's games, which will of course include England v Wales and Twickenham.
Massive game.
What a game that is. Scotland, France at Murrayfield. I think, come on, ye Scots, can you do it and keep Ireland back in it? And then of course Ireland will be the team playing Italy that weekend as well, so we'll dig into that game too. But yes, for now I think we'll park the Six Nations and leave it with France in a deserved top of the table.
Absolutely deserved. I think it's a fair enough reflection so far. England obviously have the Italy game out of the way, which gets them just to the top of that list now, but the Italy game will kind of buffer sides up either way, but a lot of rugby still to be played. The only team still in contention for the Triple Crown is Ireland, but the only team still in contention for the Grand Slam is France, and that is well deserved, I think, after 2 weeks of action.
A fair position we find ourselves as the competition goes on ice.
Next up, we turn our attention to Rugby Europe, where the competition is heating up as well. It's also through 2 rounds, same as the Six Nations. We've had week 2, we've had some spills, some thrills. The last round in particular was awesome, high-scoring affair. 224 points total scored between the 3 games of the weekend, which is just great stuff, and not normally what you would have associated with some Rugby Europe clashes over the last 5 years and 10 years. So the competition is improving. It started with Spain managing to survive a bit of a scare out in Sochi in Russia, where they certainly their discipline was letting them down at times, and then the Russians were coming at them, but they managed to just dig that one out narrowly. Then it was followed up by the Georgians taking out some of their frustration at the round 1 draw, the unprecedented draw against the rather hapless and hopelessly overmatched Oranges of the Netherlands, just getting pumped. I think it was 72 was what they racked up in that particular contest to the 10 of the Dutch. And then it was the main event was the last one again, Romania versus Portugal out in Bucharest. Awesome high-flying Portugal, a tale of 2 halves. Portugal scored some lovely scores, but an assured second half performance and a very physical second half performance from the Oaks managed to get it done, and in good style as well. So it's teed everything up quite nicely. Now Romania are nearly at that second spot. They can almost taste it in terms of automatic qualification, and they're also in a great spot in terms of sitting pretty in the tournament, and they'll have a grudge match against the Georgians to perhaps win the Rugby Europe title now as well. It's fascinating.
I mean, it's hard to overstate how quickly this tournament has changed. This was, like you say, 224 points scored in 3 games of rugby. 5 of the 6 teams scored more than 27 points, or at least 27 points. Only the Dutch didn't. Everybody else,
and they scored 10.
and they scored 10. It was, this competition is utterly transformed. It is offense, offense, offense. And while some of these teams have a little bit of work to do defensively and just in terms of tightening things up in terms of how they concede scores, particularly around the defensive maul, I am so encouraged by what they're doing, because we know that they have, at least the teams at the upper echelon of this competition, have the capacity to mix it physically with some of these tier 1 sides for periods of games. And the fact that they're putting points on the board now with such consistency
that they can go into some of those World Cup pool games and hope to grab a score or two against some top tier opposition now.
It has comfortably become the most exciting tier 2 competition, which you couldn't always say for it. I mean, Georgia were winning Grand Slams and everybody else was kind of floundering behind. Romania were probably the only other side that can mix it physically. But with Portugal and Spain coming on leaps and bounds,
Russia being game in all their fights now as well.
Absolutely. Like, it's just totally compelling, and you're seeing all of these sides really going about it the right way for them. And it's been fascinating, and it was another great weekend's viewing, and I really did enjoy it. We'll dig into the games themselves now. We're going to start out in Sochi in Russia, where the Bears came just up short with their pretty much their last chance saloon game here against the Spanish. They hustled as hard as they could, but they ended up losing the game at 37 to 41 to a very good Spanish side with some real talent in terms of the speed that they move with.
Rue and Ordas moving things nicely, some dangerous runners out wide, and they scored 41 points away from home is always a good tally, and it was what was needed, because there were some helter-skelter moments. They're still not the finished article, this Spanish team, and there are some old habits that are dying hard, particularly disciplinary ones, but in terms of how they managed to dig it out against such adversity out there and away from home, very impressive, and they're worthy of their position now after the opening 2 rounds. They've played them perfectly.
I mean, it's
perfect-ish.
I still have a hard time placing this Spanish side, because in moments, like I'm almost thinking they're kind of like a French side from maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where like in moments they're absolutely fabulous, and you wonder why they aren't winning this competition. And they are, like, at the moment they are winning this competition, but they put together dazzling sequences. They got wonderful halfbacks. Jimeno at 12 as well just cuts a clean line.
He does
pretty consistently. And they move the ball very, very excitingly. They've got skill. They got skill all over the park, and on the wings as well. They've got electricity. Their forward pack rumbles really ably at the maul, and so you're thinking, like, they blast their way to a 15 points to 3 lead, and you're thinking, these guys have way too much in it for the Russians. But then, like, in little bursts, they go asleep.
Yes.
Like some of the tries that they conceded in this game, like Davidov's run from the centre. Like, they just stopped defending. Defending. They just didn't get out of the line, looked a little gassed. And then when they get gassed, they make mistakes and they fall off tackles and they don't bring any line speed, and then they concede cards.
Yes.
And that was kind of what happened for bits of this game. I mean, like, it was very impressive the way they dug it out, but they should never have been in that position.
They looked a superior team in pretty much every facet of it, apart from the top 2 inches of temperament. Like guys like Gaisan for Russia are still very important and pivotal in getting them moving, and credit to them, they are outmatched a lot of the time, and just in terms of both speed and skill set, and they are a bit more game and have a bit more of that clutch that maybe Spain are looking to tap into if they're going to kind of complete their campaign or their run for the World Cup. But it does tee things up very in a very exciting fashion, and just such a high scoring game. I never would have thought. Look, a few years ago, Russia v Spain out in Russia. Like 41-37 in February. Geez.
And the quality of the pitch is great as well. They had that lovely clean surface.
Helps a lot.
It did it massively, and it definitely facilitated good footy. First of all, I think you have to give a massive amount of credit to the hat-trick hero, Minguion. What a second try that was. What an effort.
That was try of the game. They're absolutely stellar running.
How many players down that left-hand side. There's a question about the finish. I'm not
I'm not
a million percent sure. I don't think they had the angle to show you.
That was the issue, but it was controversial. I know Tier 2 Rugby were posting and tweeting about it. It was a little one, the freeze frame of, like, is he out? Is he not out? But
it's just a heck of an effort.
Sometimes when you're in one of those high-scoring shootout games, I'm just err on the side of try's good. Try's good, let's move on. Score more tries. And they did. They went and scored a load of tries in this game. And it was a ding-dong, humdinger of a battle. And the grit of the Russians does kind of impress me every time I see it, because they in sequences, like you're saying about Spain being good, in sequences they're all over the place and blown away and just not able to live.
Too slow.
Not able to live with anything that's happening around them. And yet they're gritty in a kind of an intangible way, and they
settle down. They settle into games, and then when the play slows down and they're able to manage their way down the pitch, they can be very competent. I like Davidov at 12. By the way, he's not winger speed anymore, but he was doing good things in there. But I also think like Dick Muir has them organised, and it was do or die for them. And I think that was the dynamic that you saw, was they were blown away by Spain, and they all knew that they had to win this game. And so even when they were 12 points down, they stayed very patient and stayed in the game and knew that they had to go find scores, and they did. And Spain, meanwhile, were just a little, flappy and a little probably flaky is probably the word, just like up and down, great, and then falling asleep in moments, and they let them back in. But what I will say is that last sequence, when the Russians stole the lead with 5 minutes to go, Spain showed great maturity to go down the field and get the winning score.
Back to their skill set to do it as well. They didn't panic. They went through the phases. So you can see their class in moments, but also a few of their kind of shortcomings revealed in this game. But credit to the visitors. It's a tough enough task to go away from home and get a win, and they did it so in good style out there. And they sit atop the table after 2 rounds now, and they're in a great spot to try and they're in 3rd overall in terms of the race for that repechage as well. So they're in very good shape. Obviously, it is the easier part of their round. Their tougher tests kind of come in the back end of the schedules, but they've done their jobs A1 to so far. The only doubt is maybe they had, like, if that player was ineligible last week, that could be come back to haunt them. But apart from that, they're in perfect position.
Thankfully, that noise is still down. They didn't get the bonus point. Sure, they didn't for this, because it's not a 4-try bonus point. It's a 3-try.
Is that true? I think on from Rugby Europe's one it says it's a 4-try bonus point rule, but I don't know if they did.
Portugal didn't get one for their loss, so I don't think so. But, so they did just get the 9 points from the opening 2 games, but it was like winning is everything in this competition, especially with the World Cup around the corner. They've seen off that tricky challenge away from home, and now they get a week off and they get to prepare themselves for what is a
block 2, the big one.
A fantastic finale for them of games against the likes of Georgia and Romania and Portugal, which will be all important and all decisive.
Teams up on a big Iberian grudge match that could yet decide who goes to the repechage or no. It's it's good colour, and congratulations to Spain
and the right result.
Absolutely, commiserations to Russia as well, but it is the right result.
Russia's problem was that they stuck with Lynn Jones for the beginning of this campaign when he was evidently mentally checked out.
One foot out the door.
They gave him a lot of credit for their showing at the World Cup, but I mean, he didn't meritocratically qualify for it the last time either. So I think Dick Muir is a good appointment. I like what I've heard from him. I've liked what I've seen on the pitch since he's come in.
Looking a little too soon in terms of
the other Scots have progressed beyond them, and they're just personnel wise a little slow. But I suspect they'll be back strong. But I think for now, we can RIP Russia.
I think so. I think they might be the first of those to go, along with the Netherlands, obviously, who were never really in the running. But I think Russia now, their campaign might be scuppered by that particular one. But Spain's is high flying, so congratulations to Los Leones for getting that W and sitting atop the table after the opening 2 rounds.
Absolutely.
And that's going to irritate the stars of the second game as well, because we pivot over to Amsterdam, where the Georgians had some kind of physical therapy, some group therapy to go through after an unprecedented home draw against a high-flying Portuguese team that did sting, and you could see it stung because guys like Daragh were just so much there to try and beat up on and do as much damage to the Netherlands as they possibly could, and 72-10, that's pretty damaging. That's good show.
The Netherlands kept it interesting for about 15 minutes.
Maybe so.
Georgians had a try chalked off, and then the Dutch went down the field, and they got maybe 10-3 at one point. I thought that actually the opening score, Tabit Sanzes, was arguably the pick of them, with a little kick on from Kamaladze and the speed to go after it and take it. But I mean, what I liked is that they had just the physical advantage all over the place. Like they were strong.
1v1 matchups.
Yeah, they were stronger than them. They were quicker than them.
Yeah.
They were
More
smarter in their rugby knowledge,
yeah.
more skillful. Like this is as mismatched a mismatch as ever was to miss a match.
Yes,
this
indeed.
was like,
if you were to miss a match, this mismatch was the match you'd miss.
Indeed,
yes.
Like it was brutal. I mean, I think the Japradza Japradza, I think is the name of the tight head who scored. Like his try was Japaridza, that's it. Yeah. His try was hilarious. Like he just caught the ball and he was trucking it up, and then he was trucking it through one, through
I guess
two,
I'll keep going,
through three,
yeah.
and over the line, trucked the big tight head, and it was like grand stuff. But I mean, that was
really
a microcosm
of
what this game was. But credit Georgia for running up on absolutely monstrous
72 points is really encouraging for Georgia's point of view, because it's exactly what they're trying to build is the offensive side.
Lobson-Idza scoring 2 tries as well was definitely had the bit between his teeth, because he was benched for Apersidza and then like not even trusted to come on and make a in that game against Portugal, because Apersidza was playing so well. But to be fair to him, he had a great game in this. He drove a great tempo, sniped well.
Two good nines in it. I think they're going to have to try and use both and rotate both, but like they need to, if they can find an heir apparent to Tato as well, they'll be laughing, then have a bit of depth in the halfback position. But they moved the ball pretty well. They got their offense purring. They managed to run up a really impressive score and do their points differential no harm after the draw that set them back, and all manner of things, as well as their confidence and going to the gap week having scored 72 points. It somewhat settles the ship, even considering the opposition. And actually, the highlight for the opposition, the Netherlands, was their captain Dirk Dannon going in for their only try, and that is his going to be his last game for the national team, Dirk Dannon. So congrats to him.
I wonder why he's quitting mid-tournament.
I don't know, but
fair play to him all the same.
Tip of the cap to him. That was definitely the highlight from a Dutch point of view. The rest was pretty ugly scenes.
It's a low. It's like talking about Italy in the Six Nations. They are trying to do some things there, but they have this Kiwi core. They have this lad Tay Campbell who they brought in at fullback, who they want to work with Jordy Hop, and they want to play some razzle dazzle, some quick footy. But like they're just these other teams overmatched, trying to make it to a World Cup, and they are not at that level. No. Not physically, not mentally, not anywhere. Like they haven't
got exposed with no experience there. They just kept finding themselves cut open left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
It's discouraging. You end up under your sticks the whole game, and it's just hopeless.
Snowballed on that. But Georgia were very impressive and are very impressive, and hopefully they get some players back. They had Sutskaridze back for this game. In the back row, remains to be seen whether they can get Saganadze and Beka Gregadze and Niniashvili and Kvesaladze as well, all back for that big game against Romania, and even the big game against Spain as well. Like those are 2 games where they want to have their eight players.
Looking at what Portugal fired their warning shot, they know they need to take this comp seriously to try and get the win. These teams are coming.
That was the cheap game. Those games are over now for Georgia, and so they'll have to go and do what they usually do and grind out the wins. But I still think quality team playing good rugby, very well, much more well-rounded than they ever were.
And getting some good, in the absence of guys like that who are missing, obviously it's not ideal to not have all your starters available, but good minutes, good test minutes for a lot of other guys on the fringe of their squad as well. They really are building quite nicely, both their offense and just their squad depth across the board. So impressive stuff from the Georgians. A comprehensive showing out in Amsterdam for sure.
No question. But then we moved on. That was very much curtain raising for what was always going to be a just huge game in the context of the World Cup qualification. The winner was going to be in pole position to go and take the Europe 2 spot and an automatic qualification for the World Cup with it. And it was a fabulous game of rugby.
It really was.
Deservedly won by a very, very good Romania side, coached by Andy Robinson, that are patient, physical, smart, and composed at all times. They were brilliant in this game. They made mistakes. They made sloppy mistakes that let Portugal in, but they never let it get to them.
No.
And in the end,
heads
their
never
power
dropped,
game
and they scored a pivotal try even before the half, even out in a half that Portugal had owned. That really kept them in touch and distance. That was so key. And then scoring clutch try at the tail end to kind of push it out beyond that bonus point, to have that macro awareness of tournament standings, and every point counts, even if it's not a point scored, a point deprived to Portugal, very, very useful too. Really, really good stuff from the Oaks in this one, and great stuff from Portugal. They still score points, like they still manage to rattle up points even away from home and up against it. They're a great side to watch.
It was cheap points, really. That was what was curious about the game. Was actually it started for a game that finished 37-27. It started with defences on top. Both sides had made good adjustments, good reads on each other, and it started with all defence. And Romania had done some great work stuffing what Portugal were doing. And then until McAfee comes up with just an absolutely catastrophic play where he tries a pick and go near his own goal line, bounces it off the guy in the ruck's leg and presents it to Marques, of all people, just sees the ball fly into his hands. It's like, oh well, try. And Jose Lima goes in for the softest of tries. And McAfee actually a couple of seconds later gave away another penalty, which made it 8-3, and he had a rough start to that game. And then Portugal come back. Their best try of the game was probably the next one that involved all those clever little hands and pieces of play from the two Pintos on the edge.
That's right.
That ended up putting Marta in for the score on the right hand side of the pitch, where they managed to flash it across the field.
Just classic Portugal, going through the hands, working the numbers and being sharp.
That was the only real major piece of offence. The others were cheap. I mean, Romania got back down the end of the pitch towards the end of the half. They were 15-3 down at this stage after giving up those pretty cheap scores. One good score and a few cheap scores. I mean, the first one could have been a penalty try and then ended up from the maul, and then ended up being great that Portugal flashed it to the end and got in. That try, there's no arguments. But then the other two were a bit cheap. They come back up the pitch, kick a dubious enough goal to go 15-6 down, and then it dubious becomes catastrophic when off the restart. And geez, what a weekend it was for restarts leading straight to tries. But it was Portugal put it on a dime for Vincent Pinto, the right winger, who was brilliant in this game
in today.
Just
and in the
knocks the
absence
ball
of
back.
Storty, he stepped up, because what were we going to do without Storty from last year? Pinto steps in and does great stuff.
Exactly. Wins the ball in the air, gets back on his feet, and then is there to claim the pass and score another very, very cheap score. And then Romania are thinking you're your worst enemies in phase play. We're shutting them down. We're doing very good things. We're physically on top. But then
them
just
broken
giving them cheap plays. But actually, the response to do that with only about a minute left in the half to come back and score a try. And it was Hinckley via Vasa, who has been such a game breaker for them, who burst through.
He's changed their offense fundamentally, himself and Tamani in the midfield, and even Melinte now at fullback. Just a completely different look to how they started last year's tournament, and they're scoring some lovely scores.
He's the guy who makes the big break. In fact, he does breaks on consecutive phases. He busts through, finds a man, and then picks and goes the next phase, and they get all the way up to the line, then work it very patiently through the phases, and just that's probably the first sequence where you really see the physical difference in the forward pack. And they made it count, probably more than Georgia did. They made it count. They kept it tight down there. Georgia were probably a little, if they were reflecting on their performance against Portugal, they were probably a little quick to flash it wide and play Portugal ball instead of just like, hang on, let's play a little slower and see if these guys can stop us playing the slow game, because they struggled then, Portugal, to contain the slow physical game.
It is tough.
And it was Daragh Serra who crashed over for the score.
You could see it in the second half, especially then. That try obviously is so important to get back into the game. But then as the second half rolled on, and you could see that Portugal are wearing like 2 weeks on the road away in Tbilisi last week. Famous draw, but they worked hard for it, and their first choice 10, Portela, took a knock, went off, didn't feature in this game. You could see them, their whole pack wearing dents.
Abakassis, I think, is the name of the 10 who came in, had a really, really bad game. He just had an awful game. He wasn't able to get the offense running.
It ended up being Pinto from fullback who was kind of stepping into that role, and then sent Marques towards towards
the end of his performance, he was just dropping balls cold. Like he just was lost out there, and that's probably something that we hadn't discussed much about Portugal, but is obviously a factor when you get a new exciting team like this. You worry about depth.
You do,
and that is
Den took a knock into Tbilisi, which is going to happen. Wasn't available for Bucharest the week after, and it was a different.
To be honest, look, like asked and answered. The answer is if Portela's out, Marques
plays 10, and you get another half back in there, because they did that towards the tail end of the first week's game anyway. When Portela went down, it's much better. Marques is the heartbeat of the team. Put him at 10.
This dude can't do it, and he couldn't do it, and it was costly, because really the offense didn't go, and it was just hustle plays from Marrakesh, and they come up
Yeah, the
with an
tap and
intercept.
go,
They
that
come
was
up
good.
with
The
an-
intercept was
they
great.
come up
Yeah,
with an
yeah.
intercept, and what a way! Like, he hasn't got the outright gas for a man in his 30s. He plucks that ball, makes the read on it from way back,
Lovely
plucks
pass
the ball,
as well.
and then just a perfect.
That's what you want your halfback to be.
Yeah,
Looking at.
yeah.
I think like your halfback should be more excited about a gorgeous assist than a try himself. To be honest,
feel like
it was
Marrakesh is,
he is
yeah.
that lovely left-handed pass, just as he could feel the contact coming over on his shoulder. Just really perfect release. Yeah, they still have all the techers, but Romania with all the heart and all the grit and composure and awareness on the macro scale to once they were edging the contest, they managed to get the 3-point lead towards the end, but they weren't satisfied with that. They went and how do you defend a 3-point lead by going and attacking it and taking the bonus point away from Portugal, which could be very pivotal by the end of the tournament.
Yeah, it was probably the next play that Marrakesh, having just got the intercept, goes again and gets the penalty and the yellow card.
And that was
a huge moment in the game. Now, they were stretched. It was probably going to be a try anyway, but it was
they had to do 10 minutes without Marrakesh, which is like losing 2 players for them, to be honest. Like, it means the offence is really struggling then.
Yeah, and that's really the sequence. That's the 10-minute period that saw Romania get control. They only scored once in it, but they
and Portugal defended very well and actually scrummaged very well, and some of them were like in terms of depth, their front row depth has definitely improved over the last year. Some of the guys coming on are big enough to kind of do some jobs there, but yeah, they were ultimately outmatched on balance, and you can see that with Romania. They're a big physical unit, and they're a calm unit, at least now. They weren't always, but they are a calm unit now, and Robinson seems to have them all marching to the same tune, and they know and understand where they are in games and how to manage their way through games, and
just how to make their size tell at this level, and that's what they did. Like, towards the tail end, after that sequence, they just found it extremely easy to get up the field and then park there. And Portugal were starting to give away penalties and sloppy and fall off tackles. And it was after it went 27-all that Pinto, the fullback Pinto, had just a drop cold off a long kick, and it was revealing because the body language from the Portuguese
looked
like last year. Just like last year, the last 10 minutes arrived and they had nothing left, and they couldn't hold out, and Romania ended up getting over the line, and then it wasn't a try, and then they took 3 because of course you want the lead in a game like this. But then
that was like 27-all
Portugal,
at that point, but
it was 30-27 then with a good few minutes left, and Portugal, for all of their quality, didn't get a shot off, didn't have a moment.
Looked a beaten dog at that point. We knew it was going to be tough, those 2 opening weeks on the road, and you could see it tell in the last 10 minutes of the second game, where they were great in the last 10 minutes of the draw out in Tbilisi. So there's improvement there, but it's tough. They do match up poorly physically against both of those teams, and you're going to play them back to back away from home. You're going to be softened up, and your 10's down. Your talismanic 9 has left the field for 10 minutes as well, and suddenly your fullback's dropping a ball cold, and it's just, you can see the whole team.
It was unraveling. And to be honest with you, from a Romanian point of view, like, they got in their own way a little bit in this game.
They did. They could maybe have won by more.
The game changed when they stopped getting in their own way. Like, they actually matched up pretty well, and obviously the absence of Portela was big, but then
Boulder was missing for Romania as well. So the 2 starting 10s from the week before didn't start this time.
But the defensive matchups that they got, like, they really, like, outside of, like, the one try that Portugal scored on a multi-phase, and it was only like a second phase, was that one where they flashed it right, but it actually came off a very good Portuguese maul. And the maul defence is the chink in the armour of all of these tier 2 sides.
And that's not limited to Rugby Europe generally.
No,
it seems like it's across the board.
It's
tier 2 defending mauls at tier 2 level, it's difficult.
They're all struggling. So it was off that maul, which was sacked and probably could have been a penalty try anyway, that they were stretched and they conceded. But outside of that, there weren't even a lot of line breaks they conceded, and if they ever settled down and got out of their own way, Portugal weren't winning contacts, and Romania were very organised defensively, very impressive.
Very much so.
I'm looking forward to seeing them play Georgia, because
I am too.
I think
it tees up that they'll now, from this point, it looks like they've secured Europe too with that one. Obviously, the key games against Spain and whatnot upcoming. But they are in pole position to take that second automatic qualification spot, and being in that position means that they're also in prime position to give a run at winning Rugby Europe for the first time since, I think, 2015. 2015-16 season, I think, that they won it, and besides that, it was Georgia all the way. And it's the old El Clasico is Georgia and Romania in this one, and it's great to see Romania in such a good place going into it. And tip of the hat to all of the players, McAvey captain as well, and the Robinson experiment out here in Tbilisi or in Bucharest really is starting to bear fruit. And when you think even a few years ago we were talking doom and gloom when that new stadium, the lovely new stadium that they are playing in, Arco de Triomphe, it has become their home now, but even that was up in the air for a while. It is kind of coalescing and coming good at the right time for Romania, and I'm expecting to see them at the next World Cup.
Absolutely brilliant. I'm expecting not just to see them, I'm expecting to see them be good. And that's the difference here with these tier 2 teams, and I want to see them play tier 1 teams as soon as possible. They're getting close to Georgia, but the next big game will be that Georgia game for them. So all of that brilliant, really compelling, high scoring, wonderful round 2 action from Rugby Europe has left the table in this position for this year. As it is, Spain, starting with the Netherlands and Russia, have got the position at top of the table, just the 9 points because of the 4-try bonus not being one, it's the 3-try advantage. Romania then in second, 2-0 themselves with the 8 points after successive wins over Russia and Portugal. Still the Netherlands to play for them.
So they can rack up some scores.
In a great position are Romania going forward to compete in this competition. Georgia just behind them on 7 points, back on track with the bonus point win after the draw. Portugal, obviously, that great draw in Tbilisi.
Sort of chalked off. It kind of it looks like 2 losing bonus points in the opening 2 rounds.
It does,
but it's not. It was one heroic draw and then one bridge too far out in Bucharest.
But it's brutal that it doesn't count. It doesn't count nearly as much as their quality might suggest on the actual table. Because now things really do get tense. Behind them, Russia just the 1 point from the opening 2 games,
and we're kind of
Netherlands
consigned
last with none.
Absolutely, and then that obviously is just the picture for this year. But in terms of the World Cup dynamics, this being a 2-parter combined with last year, this is the overall standing in the race for the World Cup. And obviously, just to reiterate, the top 2 get Europe 1 and Europe 2 spots, automatic qualification,
straight to the
pools with them if they can secure that. And then third place is where the repechage will be up for grabs, and it'll be a proper knife fight, I think, going down to the final weekend to decide just who's slipping into that repechage place. But at the moment, Romania have put themselves in great position with 22 points, and they're like a game against Holland and the like still to come. So
for those who can't see it, it's Georgia top 31 points, everybody's played 7. Then Romania 22 points, so 9 points behind the Georgians. Spain just 1 point back from Romania, 21 in that repechage position as it is. Portugal a further 5 points back with 16 points in 4th position, chasing Spain now. Russia back again, 6 points further back on 10 points, pretty much out of the equation, along with the Dutch on no points, actually mathematically out of the equation.
Yes, the Dutch are not going to a World Cup, but
the next week though we do have Portugal hosting the Netherlands, so that'll be a chance, and like a necessary 5 points. It's win this game, win it by 3 tries, get as many tries as you can humanly manage, get up and ahead of these Dutch, get your 5 points up, and then Spain host Romania, and that's a really interesting game. And I think if you're Portuguese looking at that table, I think you're probably rooting for Romania just so you can
put yourself in the repechage. They lost back to back to Romania, so you might have to cede that second place belongs to them. But if Spain do manage to do for them, that could do for Portugal's chances.
It'll certainly hurt, but they'll have games against Spain to come. But Spain hosting Romania in, obviously, just even looking at that table, just a colossal game. Spain win that, all of a sudden, who knows? They're in the driving seat for the automatic qualification, and we know they have the quality to do that.
True.
And then finally, Georgia will be hosting Russia in Tbilisi with Dick Mira's men trying to get what would be a famous scalp over in Georgia, and Georgia just trying to stay on track. And a good win there for Georgia will push them pretty much out of catching zone, regardless of what happens in the last
Europe
2 rounds.
always penciled in for Georgia, but they still have to go and get it, and not mathematically there yet because the other teams are hot in their tail.
So we'll be previewing all of those games on next week's show, and you look forward to catching that. But listen, that kind of does put a neat little bow around Rugby Europe. Just 3 rounds left now before these World Cups are decided, and each round has just gems of games with all kinds of import on them. And so it continues, but quite a dramatic weekend, and congratulations to Romania and to Spain, who started this competition very well as well.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, we're going to move on. There are a few other bits of international footy to touch on, including the Women's World Cup qualifiers. The last qualifying one, I think it's called a final qualifying tournament is what they're calling it, is taking place out in Dubai Sevens, both this weekend and next weekend. It was originally meant to be a kind of a more rounded tournament than it is. Unfortunately, there have been some COVID implications that have upset it. It was initially meant to involve 4 teams. There were going to be 2 semi-finals this weekend, followed by a final next weekend, with one team going through. But there have been a few sides that have pulled out. And originally we had Samoa versus Asia 2 and Scotland versus Colombia as the semi-finals, but Hong Kong and Kazakhstan were due to play each other to determine who would be Asia 1, but Hong Kong had to pull out. Then you had, I think, Samoa had to pull out as well due to travel restrictions as well, so they couldn't make their semi-final. So now what we end up having is only 3 teams who are heading out to Dubai to contest this. Scotland, who qualified from Europe, and as the lowest ranked side in this kind of 3-team dynamic, they are straight through to the final, which is the week after.
Surely they'd be the highest ranked side.
Oh, sorry, the highest ranked side. Highest ranked side. And then you have Kazakhstan and Colombia are the other 2 who made it. Colombia made it just in by beating Kenya in their first ever away match. They beat Kenya and have managed to make it in. So they'll have a game against Kazakhstan, who do have some pedigree in both in this comp and in the World Cup, and the winner of that will play Scotland next week.
I wish they'd make it a round robin. I don't really see why they couldn't. It's only 2 games.
It seems a bit forced that
it's in favour of the Scots.
It's unfortunate. I was looking forward to seeing semi-finals, finals would have been that was
I know, but in the absence of that, with 3 teams travelling, just make it a round robin. It's fairer.
It is fairer.
But anyway. Chances are Scotland are going to be in a great position. But then I know very little about the Kazakhstan and Colombian teams, apart from the fact that Kazakhstan have been to the World Cup a good few times before.
They have. Kazakhstan, they're ranked 15th at the minute, and they played in 5 successive tournaments from 94 to 2010, finishing from 5th to 8th. So they do have pedigree in the women's game, Kazakhstan. Coached by, Anna Yakovleva as well, local woman. They're a good team to be admired. But Scotland are the lowest ranked there. Scotland are currently ranked 9th, or the highest ranked, and that has by some volition that makes them go straight through to next week. So just in terms of the new format schedule, we have Colombia versus Kazakhstan this Saturday. That's February 19th at the Sevens in Dubai, and that's going to kick off at 4:35 local time, or 12:35 GMT, I believe. And then the winner of that game will go on to play Scotland on Friday, February 25th, so the following weekend on Friday.
Well, it's an open question as to who that benefits more, the Scots coming in cold for one game. But obviously, just having to win one game to make it to the World Cup is easier than winning 2.
It is, on the macro scheme of it. And it also, the selfish Irish fan in me is going, we really dropped the ball by not making it this far. Would have just had to beat maybe Kazakhstan. Oh well. No, good luck to the Scots. Good luck to all 3 teams as well. There's only one spot left up for grabs in that World Cup, which will go on later this year. Obviously, it's the World Cup 2021, but played in 2022. And hopefully we'll get a good comp out in New Zealand. And first up this weekend, it is a bit of women's game action. It's kind of got a bit of intrigue.
I assume World Rugby will just be throwing it up on the YouTube channel.
That is right. Yeah, it's free to air, so they're chucking it up on all their services, including their YouTube channel, so you can stream it live or you can watch it back on YouTube. But worth a watch. The women's game going on, and the last little piece of the puzzle to go into that World Cup, which has been heavily disrupted by COVID, and I suppose it's on theme for the qualifier tournament to still be disrupted by COVID, and unfortunate for teams like Samoa to miss out on the basis of travel restrictions. That just seems very frustrating, but hopefully we'll get through this and get into the tournament then later this year and have a great display of women's rugby then.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. But listen, we're also going to take a look before we wrap up Test Rugby, I should say, at the under-20s Six Nations, which we didn't mention last week, but probably should have. But basically we're 2 rounds into the under-20s, which is running parallel to the main tournament. The only under-20s comp going ahead this year, unfortunately. There's none of those Tier 2 Nations Cup 20s competitions, which is a shame. But we did have some very interesting results. I mean, it opened with a weekend for Ireland beating a Welsh team that was nowhere near the pitch 53-5. France beat Italy 41-15. England beat Scotland 41-24. All fairly
kind of blowouty, not as intriguing in
perhaps why we didn't mention it last week. And then last weekend the cat really did come amongst the pigeons. Italy beat England 6-0 in Treviso.
6-0 in Treviso. The last time I remember Leinster winning a game 3-0 out there. At
that was
one point.
Zebra,
That
actually.
was at Zebra,
but it's
just similar.
Northern
yeah.
Italy,
Yeah.
it sometimes yields those games.
Yeah.
But Italy hustled hard, didn't yield an inch, and nilled a much touted England team.
It's kind of the inverse of what happened in the other. both teams got nilled in both Six Nations, but Italy did the nilling. That's very impressive from the Italian under-20s. Credit to them.
Who are coming along
very nicely, playing a good brand, and it's nice to see them scupper England out in Rome. That's always fun, fun dynamic. And then there was the other game was there was a blowout just a double score in terms of Wales 26 and Scotland 13.
Yeah, Scotland had the lead parts of this game, so Wales did well to come back, but obviously a Welsh team that shipped 50 in week 1, beating you by more than 10 is probably a sign that Scotland
are a little bit below the rung.
Not where they need to be.
Might struggle with some of the more massive teams that are out there in this comp, but there is always a disparity. Some teams are just a little bit more developed physically than others, and you can see that
every year. It's always the dynamics are slightly different, and you're basically just looking out for talent. Although the Italians making great strides, but one of the other stories of the weekend, we were delighted to report that Ireland beat France 17-16, and it was a hilarious game because I did watch it, and France were
all over us in
all
many
over
parts.
Ireland. It looked like at any moment they were going to just break free and score 3 tries, and that was going to be it.
A triumph for organisation over skill.
Ireland stuck with it. Well, they had some physicality, they had some good moments. They did basically just a bit like the senior team, just stayed in the fight.
Good display of stick-to-itedness.
That's right. And then at the very end, won it with a short range try from a kick to the corner and a maul. I mean, perhaps there are lessons to be learned there from the senior side.
More savvy and more nous from the under-20s, perhaps. With a lovely clutch conversion at the death as well that needed to be made because it was out of the angle. But great grandstand finish to that one. Proper intensity as well. Good sound in the crowd, and just really really good game of footy. And it's nice to be on the right side of it this time. But Ireland France just delivers. It doesn't really matter the circumstance. But France Ireland France, it just delivers as a game.
It definitely does, and that leaves Ireland top of that table with only. With the only side still in the Grand Slam hunt, which is just a great place for us to be, and of course that goes on ice as well this weekend and comes back running parallel with the senior tournament. But that about wraps up all of the test footy that we have to talk about today. Obviously we don't have any meaty previews to get into, so it's going to be a little shorter show as you well know, but we're going to run through, just before we finish, we're going to run through some of the club footy that's been going on. Starting in Europe, where there was 4 games in total played in the top 14s in France. Toulouse shipped their 5th consecutive defeat in the absence of their main boys. And they had COVID issues, and then they had the national side plucked out from under them. So that contextualizes a little bit. But as it is, you look at the form guide in the top 14s table, and theirs is the worst. L. 5 L's, and it's that's obviously pretty crazy. It was a 29-28 win for Stade Francais, pipping them at the death. They hustled hard, like parts of what they're doing without Dupont and Entamac, like Zach Holmes at 10 is really hurting them at the moment. He's not playing well.
No, he's not. He's been there for quite a few years, and he's not playing well at the minute for sure. No, Toulouse kind of struggling to stem the league. It hasn't been a great season for them in just even from the off. They haven't really started with the same kind of just gravitas and quality that their squad was providing more than just the front runners.
Their early season wins though have left them in an okay position.
They're still scrapping in the barrage hunt for sure. And actually Stade Francais are up there in that hunt as well, near enough there in the mix. So credit to them for a very good win. The other results were a home win for Racing, 35-29 win over Pau. Brive with a 27-20 home win over Clermont, and Toulon managing to stem their league as well with a 21-18 win over Bordeaux, who are top at the minute. So a good win for Toulon.
Return of Eben Etzebeth
maybe had something to do with it in terms of stepping up in the physicality. They'll be delighted. He'll be off for pre-season soon though for the Rugby Championship.
Exactly. That's your game you get out of them now for this year. So that about wrapped up the top 14s, which is left in all kinds of intrigue, and it'll rumble this weekend. There'll be more games. Pau against Toulouse, hoping to finally stop the rot. Brive against Montpellier, Stade Francais against Biarritz, Toulon versus Perpignan, Castellon, La Rochelle Clermont is not a bad one on Saturday evening, and Bordeaux Racing is the Sunday game as well, which is not a bad one.
That's a pretty good Sunday game at 8:05. The prime time showing for it.
Looking for some games to fill in the absence of the international footy this week. That might be where to look. The URC also rumbling on.
Yes, we had 4 rescheduled games last weekend. I think I'm not sure what round they were from, but there were a few that were outstanding. Leinster started things off on Friday night with a bonus point win over Edinburgh, 26-7. A bit of a scuttery game, to be honest. You were at it. It was, slow but effective.
Not much in the way of offence. It was a lot of defending Edinburgh's not great attacks very well. Like Leinster always lean on their defence, to be honest, when they don't have the Sexton and the big boys there. Their defence is where they make their money.
Yeah.
And they did. The curious dynamic to this game was that they generated a lot of opportunities to accrue points and consistently turned down threes, perhaps to the death of wisdom sometimes, like where they had like a narrow enough lead. And I was thinking it was 14-0 they were up.
Well, it amounted to a 4-try bonus point win that you wouldn't have got with an attacking display like that if you didn't just keep going for it.
Correct, exactly right. Like they butchered so many of them, and it was looking super dubious because I was thinking to myself, one cheap try here, and they're in striking range. They're also in losing bonus point range. Like, that would be really frustrating. We could just kick them to bed, especially the way we're playing.
It was like a salesperson dynamic. If I knock on the door 10 times, then maybe once I'll get over. Exactly. Those kinds of rates of return. 100 times, then maybe once or twice we'll get over.
I wouldn't always recommend it with your offense playing so badly, but Leinster stuck to the task, backed their forward pack and their bench, and ultimately got 4 tries in.
Over an Edinburgh side that are contenders now. They're up in the mix in that top flight of the table. It is all shadow box, and obviously with the top 8 set to go through, so both of those sides are in a pretty comfortable position, but nonetheless a good win for Leinster, and a similarly good win for Glasgow, who are taking Irish scalps, which is not something that has been happening in this tournament of late over the last few years, but Glasgow are setting a precedent. 13-11 win in the deluge out in Scotstoun against Munster.
Big performance from Scott Cummins all round, including the winning try. Which is a nice charge down box kick.
Of a telegraphed slow box tick, which,
ample punishment for what Munster do.
Indeed, we're going to telegraph things as much as that and be as one-dimensional, plucking a one-string banjo, then maybe you might get charged down and lose a game, a tight scrap in the rain.
Yeah, I mean, Munster obviously shorn of plenty of their internationals themselves, and Glasgow too, but Glasgow had a little more quality on the pitch. Like, you looked at the team sheets matching up against one another, and actually Glasgow were the stronger. So it was right and proper that they got the win at home. A couple of games in South Africa as well. The Lions, unfortunately, are...
the rot continues for them, to be honest.
They're not at the level this Lions team.
10 points scored at home in Ellis Park. That's not great.
Especially with your altitude and all your running rugby pedigree. But no, the Stormers' renaissance rumbles on, and they stuffed them 32-10. And then the Bulls hosted the Sharks in a game that featured some red cards. Mornay Stain perhaps a little harshly red carded for one of those freeze frame shoulder to heads, but it was one of those classic 10 tackles where he wasn't
really bringing any heat to any of that contact. He was kind of backpedaling.
I felt you could mitigate it down to a yellow myself.
The Cipriani red card from years ago that was harsh as well, because if you're not throwing your shoulder in and you're not bringing the force to the collision, you can maybe mitigate that down. But now I'm saying like an Aussie, no, mate, no.
Well, I didn't think there was a massive amount of danger in it, but as it was, Mornay trotted off pretty early in the game, and that left the Bulls in a bad position, although the Sharks picked up a red themselves later on. But it was a good away win for the Sharks, who are now establishing themselves as a comfortably better team than the Bulls, which is exactly where they should have been for all this time, when the Bulls were just randomly uncatchable seemingly at the top of South African rugby. They're now floundering a little bit
into the pack.
The highlight reel of the match, and probably the whole weekend of the URC, was certainly the Lacanio Am, another straight from the restart try, just to add to the many straight from the restart tries we had on the week. And this was probably the pick of them, plucking the ball out of the air and then
dancing
dropping it
staying in field just about with the tiptoes and then dropping on the toe, finishing in the corner. Expert.
He's like, I know I wax lyrical about him way too often on this show, but the fact that he's getting so good offensively, and it's because he's smart, really smart and humble, but so he knows he has to improve in some areas, but for a guy as physical as him and with his cracking a read on the game defensively and now offensively, his skill set used to be a problem. It's not now. His rate of on the toe was great. His rate of improvement, none of that come naturally to him. That's the funny thing about Lacanio Am, was he was always a pretty natural defender, but none of the skills, when he first even burst onto the scene,
a few cold drops and stuff.
None of those skills came natural to him, and now he's one of the best in the world at it, and if not the best. He's top. This guy's rate of improvement is just keeps going. He is the best in the world for me, and shows it week in, week out.
And he was definitely the highlight reel moment from the URC this week came from himself. So that tees things up. Next week there are a few games as well in round 12. On Friday we have Cardiff v Zebra and Munster v Edinburgh. Then on Saturday Leinster play Ospreys and Glasgow host Benetton, as well as Scarlets hosting Connacht. So a couple of good games on Saturday, I think. And then on Sunday there's one kick-off in the afternoon. Dragons are hosting Ulster. So a full round of footy going on in the absence of Six Nations rugby, and a few players have been released from all of these squads. There'll be some fringe players getting some minutes in this one.
Didn't get any game time the last couple of weeks.
Tackle bag holders, as they're branded sometimes, but no, they'll be back on the field. So we'll see some good contests in the URC this weekend, methinks.
Likewise, the Premiership had games last weekend. London Irish pulled off one of their random class performances that they occasionally bring out.
They have them in them.
Won away at Bristol 49-32 in a shootout, and comfortable winners there in Ashton Gate. That's an impressive one. The Leicester Tigers, though, no such problems for them. 35-20 win over Northampton. They stay strong at the top of the table.
Stock standard Leicester v Northampton game.
A little bit, but listen, without their internationals, Julian Montoya has really taken that team by the scruff of the neck.
Yes.
The other narrative that's starting to rumble is that Sale Sharks under Alex Sanderson, who
starting to come good. I was rating it for a while. It wasn't happening for him at the beginning of the season. He was finding himself on the wrong side of scrappy one-score games, but it's coming good.
They've got themselves to a winning record now. They're now 7-6-1.
Yes. On course for playoffs, not quite, but they need still work to do there. But they're in the hunt.
They're up to 8th now in the table, but crucially they have a game in hand, and if they were to win that, they would draw level on points with Quins in 4th.
So they're definitely in the hunt, and they're good, dangerous side. They always had the defensive chops, and they're starting to just run some scores in this season.
On the move. Then Exeter beat Gloucester 24-15 in a game that happened, and then Wasps beat Bath 41-24. Again, you take the Cam Redpath out, and Bath's wins go a begging.
Yeah, that's true.
But then the other game, unfortunately for Harlequins, Tommaso Allen not managing to live up to Marcus Smith, and in his absence they slip another defeat. Saracens 19, Quins 10.
Sarries managed to just expertly milk a penalty towards the death to just kick it away from a losing bonus point as well. So really good savvy from Saracens, who are just that kind of club. And Quins are still struggling with the absence of their key men up in England. It's quite a new experience for them. Sometimes they were feeling a bit shunned or a bit feeling jilted that not enough of their players are getting into England. But the problem is, when they're gone, some of these games get very, very tough in this very, very competitive league where all sides are just taking scalps off top of the table, bottom of the table.
Exeter are 6th at the moment. Like, they're not, no one's guaranteed top 4. Gloucester are in 3rd at the moment.
Bristol way down still.
It's all up for grabs. Like, absolutely it is.
Volatile.
Bristol themselves are 5-9 on the season and have probably fallen too far back.
You can't keep shipping 49 points at home. As much as you score 32, that's great. But how many your season ticket holders don't want to see you ship 49 points at home?
Indeed. They kick off the weekend this weekend actually on Friday evening away at Worcester, so they have a chance to get back on the course then Quins host Wasps, Bath host Leicester, Northampton hosts Sale, and London Irish host Saracens, all on Saturday. And on Sunday Newcastle host Exeter. And that'll round out that league.
A few good games there to be watched for sure.
Absolutely. But yes, there was not only club footy in Europe, there was also club footy around the world.
Indeed.
And we'll start in America, in North America, where the MLR round 2 rumbled on.
It did.
There were a few interesting games. I'm loving to see the Seattle Seawolves are back, baby.
Playing good footy.
After a bad year, they're right back. 2-0 win over the Utah Warriors, who are one of the top teams in the league
as well. Yeah, that was probably a high quality game. Didn't get to see it, but 2017. Those are two teams that'll be in the mix towards the business end. And the Port Toronto Arrows, despite being back in their home stadium, it wasn't enough good juju to see off the somewhat stung LA Guiltinis from last week, who managed to win 31-16 away from home.
Bounced back pretty well.
Yes, indeed.
The San Diego Legion beat the Dallas Jackals, much more competitive from the Jackals this time around. 37.
They still haven't played a home game yet. We'll get them into their stadium, for God's sake.
Yeah, they still haven't got a point either.
No, that's true.
Then Rugby New York stole the game at Houston. It was with 10 points to 7 with a last minute try to make it from 7-3 to
what a game
to 10-7. And fair play to Rugby New York for stealing that one. And the ATL managed to beat out NOLA Gold in New Orleans as well. And the Austin Gilgronis put 57 past Old Glory, who are unfortunate Twitter friends, might be the whipping boys in this year's competition.
I know they lost their tight head, Mr. Removable, as he had been branded by the social media men. They lost him over the season, in the off season. I think they're short a few of their men from last year. They seem to be on board the struggle bus for 2022 so far, so they'll need to try and arrest some of that momentum. But yeah, it's tees up things quite nicely in the MLR. The only two perfect teams so far are the Gilgronis and the San Diego Legion, with a perfect 10 from possible 10. But then that leaves guys like the LA Guiltinis mid-table in that conference who will rack up some scores. So it's already getting a little bit of intrigue. Round 3 does rumble on this weekend as well. There are some good games. Old Glory will be hosting the New England Free Jacks, who looked impressive in week 1. They were running the ball quite nicely.
3 heavy defeats in a row.
It's a home one. Hopefully the fans can help them out. That's the first game of the weekend on Saturday. Then Rugby ATL hosting Rugby New York. That could be a good game for sure. Also on Saturday, Nola Gold versus Toronto Arrows. Both have got off to rough starts and need
a win.
They both need a win.
Backs to the walls for two good sides.
Yeah. Austin Gilgroni's Utah Warriors. There's a game.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
That's a big one.
Two very competent sides there. Dallas Jackals will have their first home game of ever.
I can't believe they did them so dirty like that. To start their existence with 2 away games and then come into their first home game 0-2 already with spirits dampened is just so dirty.
It is a bit. But they will be hosting the Houston SaberCats, who are a decent side as well, so it could be tough.
And I think the game of the weekend is San Diego Legion hosting Seattle Seawolves as well. I'd be very curious to see if Seattle can go away from home to San Diego. That was a final, I think, the first 2 years.
It was
a final.
a bit of a grudge match there in terms of just it's a relatively new tournament, but it does have some dynamics. It already has some brewing rivalries.
The Seawolves are MLR royalty.
They are.
They're an established historical franchise.
Yes.
So don't be doing them dirty.
But there was also action out there wasn't. There was no action last week in Japan in Rugby League 1, but there is this weekend. We've got through the first 5 rounds of action, and now we're coming back for round 6. This Saturday, I think it kicks off with the first game, Black Rams v Kubota Spears, Shizuoka Blue Revs versus Cannon Eagles, the Toyota Verblitz versus Kobelco Steelers, and Wild Knights versus Toshiba Brave Lupus. That is on all of the games on Saturday. And then on Sunday there are 2 games. There's the Green Rockets versus Suntory Sun Goliath, and Red Hurricanes versus the Shining Arcs. A couple of mismatches in this one, but there were a couple of games that could be good. I think the Blue Revs v Cannon Eagles and Verblitz v Kobelco Steelers could be in the mix. The disappointing thing about round 5 was that just whatever quirk in the schedule, they were all blowouts.
Yeah.
So hopefully a few more competitive mid-season games is kind of what the adjustment in this and the rebranding was about, was trying to do away with some of the dead rubbers and some of the blowouts and some of the low intensity affairs that we have seen. So hopefully
get rid of the brand names, turn them into regions, and actually get yourself a proper comp. Japan.
You're not sold on this League 1.
How can you cheer for Toyota over Kobelco or Toshiba against Panasonic?
Because I'm a Panasonic guy.
Yeah.
My father was too.
Yeah.
We're loyal.
I don't know about that.
Don't know. It's definitely a different thing, but what it does give is just corporate money, which gives it legs, and it gives contracts to South Sea Island players.
There's some quality on show. It's razzle dazzle. Did you see Quade Cooper's
NFL
crossfield NFL?
He was just in Super Bowl fever last time. Those kinds of moments, little viral moments, it does produce. But when you sit down to watch some of the games, either they're mismatches or they're quite low intensity sometimes. So you can get away with some beach rugby like that if you're Quade Cooper and you're just having fun.
Correct. It is all about the fun. I think it's just fun rugby if you want to enjoy it. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
Really and truly. But yes, that doesn't wrap up the World Rugby just yet, because this weekend we have the unveiling of Super Rugby Pacific.
Yes.
The latest rebrand for this historic competition. Basically, the first ever clash between the newly formed Moana Pacifica and the Blues has been postponed, unfortunately. There's been a COVID outbreak in the Moana Pacifica squad. You are going to see some COVID disruptions. There's still quite a few restrictions, and they're still middle of wave over there, I think, in Australia,
they're
New Zealand.
weighing up whether, I know that all the New Zealand teams are quarantining in Queenstown, or are going to do their thing in kind of a bubble, COVID-safe bubble, and there's rumblings about moving part of the tournament in the later stage stages out to Australia. Basically, they want to keep the schedule as best they can, allowing for a few disruptions here or there that they'll reschedule. They are starting on the 18th, which was the date set ages ago, so that has been pretty much powering through a lot of disruption. Like the Queensland Reds had an outbreak a couple of weeks ago, and there's still a few guys from their team missing. But obviously, it is disappointing that the curtain raiser was set to be the Blues, who are Trans-Tasman champs, up against Moana Pacifica, the new franchise, and that would have been a nice curtain raiser.
Yeah.
It has had to be postponed, and actually the Chiefs have had to test themselves as well, because they shared the same charter flight as the Pacifica players, although as a result of the first round of testing, no cases were identified in the Chiefs squad, so their game is still going ahead.
Great stuff. And as we all know, like Super Rugby, obviously very different from what it once was, but nevertheless, this is a dynamic and very exciting tournament to watch when it's at its best, when the Kiwi teams are going hell for leather, and even in recent years, the Reds and the Brumbies, like there's really high quality, great footy. It lays the foundation for the All Blacks and the Wallabies seasons,
very much so,
and hopefully now Fiji's as well to some extent.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. Fiji and Drua, now that will be the opening game, is that they're playing, I think, the Waratahs away from home in Oz on Friday night, so that'll now be the curtain raiser. So we will get to see Fiji and Drua, and they haven't had to have they've had their pre-season games disrupted by COVID, so this will be their first time stacking up against any opponents.
Absolutely. Just a couple of notes on the rules, the laws. Apparently one of the things that they're getting hyped on, this is like a total reactionary from the Springboks last year, but they're saying during games referees will manage the time taken at set pieces. Players will be given 30 seconds to be ready to form scrums, and lineouts must be ensured to be set up and completed without delay. Referees will also look, this is one that's curious, referees will also look to play on from minor injuries, and TMOs are expected to allow the on-field match officials to make more decisions. So it's a little we'll
There's
see
a little vagary in that in that statement.
Basically, it's just let's be yet more laissez-faire.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a danger of them playing a whole other sport to some extent, and then coming into test level when the game is refereed, and then be shocked by the refereeing of the game.
And then you'll have all of those hot mic moments where it's like, oh, that's just disgraceful. It's not rugby. And it's like, it is actually rugby, guys. You're just tweaking the rules for your own sake when you're playing in isolation.
They're keeping the 20-minute red card replacement. So basically, after the red card, the player is going to be off the whole game. The replacement can be brought on after 20. And then 50-22 obviously still there. Goal line dropout still there. And the golden point from last year, which I thought was a good innovation.
I agree with that.
Is still there. So it plays out a little more like NFL, where if it finishes in a draw, you do go and hunt a win. And then if there's no winner, then you say, draw. If nobody wins after, I think, 10 minutes, then it's forget it. We'll draw. We'll
just
call it
to end this game.
Call it a draw. But I agree with the sentiment of it, but there's safety issues involved with setting up scrums correctly.
Yeah, indeed. 30 seconds to set up a scrum just seems like way too quick. To be honest, as much as you want to speed the game up, you do need all the people to be positioned correctly. It's like it's 8 huge body, huge like it's a pack of 8 forwards
props and going, get into each other, get into each other. Exactly. It's a part of the game, and I know they were annoyed at the Springboks going down for injuries, but at the same time, a referee is not going to be in a position to determine what is or isn't a minor injury.
Yeah, that's also true. I don't know.
This is a physical game. There are going to be injuries and there are going to be breaks.
There's also going to be perfect patches. You're going to have to deal with teams who are a little bit more physical, a little bit slower, who are going to want to make the game so, and it'll be up to you to when it is your chance to speed that game up. But that's the push and pull. I definitely, some of those rules do strike me as a little bit quirky in that regard, but still should make for some exciting rugby. Where it's high summer over there. A lot of the tournament's going to be played out in Oz seemingly, so dry tracks and running rugby all around. And
it's televised in plenty of places. It's not televised everywhere. And so for the first time, all of the matches are going to be live streamed. They've launched their own streaming service, sanzarrugby.tv, in the territories that don't have rights holder broadcasters, which includes the UK and Ireland. So basically that platform is also going to have archive footage from previous Super Rugby games, previous Rugby Championship matches, but a backlog of Sanzar stuff that you can also access for it. So it's not free. It's 50 quid for the season. They say one-time payment. Now, I don't for the season, there is a one-time payment, because if it's for one season, then it's not a one-time payment.
No, indeed.
It's an annual payment, which is not the same thing. So it's £50 UK to go and get that, and we'll see.
Remains to be seen.
Remains to be seen, but I might splash out for it. But that's a new product that they're unveiling as well. So it's disappointing perhaps not to see it be televised, but great to see them making it available at least in some way.
Yeah, it has always been a gripe that sometimes these are just seen behind closed doors.
Well, it always irritates me that I have to go illegal to watch a game. There should always be a legal way for you to watch a game, especially in the modern world that we exist in. If it's broadcast somewhere, it can be broadcast everywhere.
Yes,
really,
it's true. It's true, and that's something that commentary teams have to bear in mind as well. You have to be as a non-partisan in that regard, because you never know, it could be someone across the world watching it, but also in terms of just democratizing the viewing of it, for sure it helps when you have some legal channels to do that. But this weekend's fixtures then obviously scratched the Moana Pacifica Blues game, but tees off with Waratahs v Fiji and Drua on Friday. That's the curtain raiser for the whole tournament.
A lot of unfamiliar names in this. I'm looking at we have the teams now for some of these games. It's a young enough Waratahs side. They do have Angus Bell at loosehead. True, he's going to try and be destructive. They have Jake Gordon at 9. Those are the only
they have
two.
Michael Hooper back in the squad, but he's not. I'm not sure if he's
not
this weekend.
Not around this weekend.
No, but he is a little bit of goldust back from Japan. Which
also
is
wearing
key.
the 23 shirt for the Waratahs this week is one Jamie Roberts,
who
just pops up everywhere. So he does.
There you
He's
go.
been in the Stormers. He's now in the Taz.
Good luck to Jamie out there. Hopefully have a good season.
But I think we're all rooting for the Drua in that one.
We kind of are. They are the people.
They're the great unknown. We'll see what they bring.
Yeah, no, indeed. Who is their coach? They're coached by Mick Byrne. They do have a few exciting players. Obviously, it's always exciting when you have a bunch of Fijian players that you've never seen before, because sometimes they blow you away. But you have Dolakoto, who is a really good Fiji hooker. He has some test minutes. He could be pretty pivotal for them at set piece time. They have former Olympic champions Bolaka Nosoko and Daragh Nalagi, so 3 Olympic sevens guys in the mix there as well. So there's definitely some talent. You assemble any group of Fijians.
So if the Waratahs are a little disoriented,
and a little soft, they're coming off a winless campaign the last time out. Remember, the Waratahs were very young and they were looking outmatched. So this is not a bad opening game or little introduction for Fiji and Drua. And if they are to the pace to make it competitive, then it tees up the rest of the tournament very well. But I will temper expectations. It could be a rough start for these new franchises to get up to speed. We just don't know what they look like yet, particularly with Fiji and Drua, because their COVID disruptions pre-tournament mean that they haven't actually played any warm-up games. So apart from an internal one that they played amongst their squad.
They have a bit of history. They were playing in that Aussie tournament that the Western Force were in, the rival tournament with the 6-point tries and everything.
Yes, and all the other goofy
they're not brand new, Fiji and Drua, but hopefully they can front up.
Yes, indeed. Then next up as well, we have on Saturday Chiefs v Highlanders, the opening game on Saturday. Now there's a good game. There's one with a bit of history, a bit of pedigree. Excited to see the Chiefs take the field this year. I feel like they could be good. They were very good last year and showed much improvement. You have guys like Sean White, guys like Damien McKenzie, Lachlan Boshier have gone, but Brodie Retallick is back. Josh Ioane's joined from the Highlanders. Obviously, they're still reeling from the lack of Sean Wainui as well from last year. Obviously, RIP, but still a lot of exciting players in that team. And Clayton Macmillan is still in there. Sam Cane as well will be looking to return this season for the Chiefs. He's been out for well over a year for them. He's their club captain. It'll be good to see him get back on the field for them.
We have the teams for this week. They do have the Chiefs have gone with Brodie Retallick back in there. Sam Cane back in there. Good. Josh Ioane at 10. Quintu Paya in the midfield. John Lowe on one wing. Sean Stevenson on the other. That's pretty impressive.
It's a team ready to run the ball.
Back row of Luke Jacobson, Sam Cane, and Peter Gus Sawakula, who's been very good for them in recent years as well. So there's pretty much quality all over the park as far as the Chiefs are concerned. They have Brad Weber to bring off the bench as well, and Chase Tia and Sami Soni Taukiaho, who had a huge year for the All Blacks last year.
Broke his way into that seemingly insurmountable All Black hooker picture. He forced his way in with some great stuff last season. And then on the Highlanders side, you still have Tony Brown in charge, who never sleep on that guy. He always has something up his sleeve.
And crucially, your captain and talisman Aaron Smith. And listen, there's been a lot of loose chat about a certain other 9 being the best player in the world.
Yes.
And I don't doubt his quality. He's after beating us last week, but I still think that Aaron Smith is the number 1 9, and I think he might be out to prove it, driving that ferocious tempo that he does drive. They've also got some solid players themselves. Shannon Frizzell, he's obviously going to be out to try and get that All Black jersey. Liam Coltman at hooker, quality player himself. And a few more unknowns, as is always the way with the Highlanders. They got Mitch Hunt at 10. They got a few more sort of.
Well, it's been a big season for the likes of Liam Coltman at 2, because they're missing a few guys from last season. Ash Dixon, Mr. Highlanders, he's gone. Josh Ioane obviously gone now. Michael Collins as well, a bit of a stalwart in the back 3 and in rotating in. He's gone. Tokalahi is gone as well as Kazuki Himeno, who was big for them.
But who's back? Marty Banks.
And
he's on the bench where he belongs, so he can come on and kick the winning kick.
That's true. He does do that, and even guys like Emmanuel Jensen on the bench is a bit of razzle dazzle too. So some good definitely there. But be on the lookout for Aaron Smith, who will be the heartbeat of this Highlanders team this season.
Yeah, no question. It's all on Aaron for the Highlanders and their competitiveness. But they somehow do find a way to be competitive, even though they'll go in up against it.
Yeah. Next up, Crusaders play the Hurricanes in an El Clasico of this tournament as well. That's a Saturday evening one. Really excited to see that. Obviously, Crusaders, Scott Robertson, the standard for this tournament. They are the gold standard. They're missing a few, and certainly our own Michael Alalatoa has left their ranks and joined our own a world away. But they still have serious talent. None more so than Pablo Matera, who's set to make his first start for the Crusaders in the back row.
It's a pretty terrifying squad they've selected.
They
didn't know with the Blues that Bowden Barrett, again, not quite ready to start. And actually, Richie Mo'unga, apparently, as part of his negotiated contract, can take little sabbaticals, and is taking one at the beginning of this season, so he'll be in mid-season, I believe.
There you go. Yeah.
So there's no Mo'unga, who has been the MVP of this competition, I think, for 2 years in a row. But I'm just going to name the list of quality internationals in this opening weekend starting team for the Crusaders. Yeah. Joe Moody, Scott Barrett, Sam Whitelock. That's their locks, Scott Barrett and Sam Whitelock. Pablo Matera, Cullen Grace at number 8. I believe he's capped. Then they got Bryn Hall and Fergus Burke at 9 and 10, which is like Bryn Hall can be quality. It's not quite the Richie Mo'unga, but they make up for it outside with David Havili, Braden Enor, Lester Fainganuku, George Bridge, and Will Jordan.
It's danger.
Isn't it just dangerous? And they got George Bauer to bring on as well.
Yeah,
Sever Reese on the bench as well.
Mighty impacts. It is the depth of this squad as well as their organisation that really makes them firm favourites going into this new tournament for sure. But they will meet a Hurricane side that will, have no fears, and we'll be looking to take them on. It's kind of a win-win, you don't expect to beat the Crusaders on day one, and yet if you do, you tee yourself up very, very nicely from a Hurricanes point of view.
Canes themselves have some quality on the pitch in this game. It's obviously not quite as stacked as the Crusaders. How could you be? But they do have Artie Savia back in and captain. News. They have Geordie Barrett in and spiritual leader as well. Those two have carried this team to great heights in the past.
Very much so.
And they've got little quality players like Wes Huson is an underrated class player on the wing. Who does consistently great things for this team. Asofo Almua at hooker can just take games over. So they definitely have promise, this Canes team, and good to see Julian Savia on the wing as well back home.
Absolutely, no, indeed, a few people set to return for them. Obviously, I don't see the talismanic 9 that they do have at their disposal. TJ Perinara, he's away at Japan. But Dom Bird is back in terms of the squad. He's back from his European travels. Their old school partnership of Vincent Asso and Ngani Lamape is a while away, and they have a new look in their centre and a new balance to their backline as a result of it.
Billy Proctor and Umanga Jensen, the question mark as to whether they can be as explosive as they're going to need them to be. And
then little Jamie Booth at 9, big shoes to fill as well, needs to get them moving, because the Hurricanes at their best do move pretty quickly and are combative from 9, so big test for them. But guys like Captain Sevilla, they'll lean on their All Blacks, Aumua, Lomax. The guys up front will really need to step up, because that is always the big test against the Crusaders.
And always with the Kiwi teams, there's always that dynamic of which side is going to which player I should say is going to just arrive at the explosive pitch and take over all of the commentary and walk into an All Black jersey.
Yes,
it's always someone.
Who will it be this year? I don't know. It remains to be seen. But exciting footy that one.
There's some Aussie footy going on as well. Later on Saturday, there's the Reds hosting the Rebels.
Yes.
The Reds again coming in
majorly disrupted pre-season and preparation for this because of COVID in their camp.
Yeah, but pretty stacked now that they're actually back. Everyone seems to be back and healthy.
Yeah, Brad Thorne included. He was one of their ones fell, but he seems to be back too.
Yeah, I mean they've got like obviously Taniela Tupou, the absolute leader of this side and the MVP of this side. But Salakai Loto in there with Angus Scott Young, Liam Wright, and Harry Wilson makes a very good pack with even Fraser McWright to bring on off the bench. Yeah, they got Tate McDermott and JOC at halfback.
Yeah, there's not much change. They only had 3 people depart last year. Payanga Mosa, the hooker, Bryce Hegarty, and Moses Sarovi were the only people who departed. So it's quite a settled side, and they were champions of Super Rugby last year. So
maybe they'll be wearing their years a little better. They got Dangunu and Pattaya on the wings with Hamish Stewart and Josh Fluke at centre and Jock Campbell at fullback. And by riposte, the Rebels have some quality in their team as well. Joe Powell at 9. They got Matt Phillip in the locks. He's obviously class.
Really good.
Jordan Nualese, Captua Wallaby International in that hooker. They've got Stacey Illy at 13. He's a quality player, and Reece Hodge obviously at fullback can take games over himself for this team.
Big departure of Marika Corabetti they will miss.
No,
they might be a Corabetti shaped hole out there for them.
Hunter Paisami on the bench for the Reds as well, by the way.
And actually Dane Haley-Petty is another stalwart of that team who's been forced to retire in the off season as well. So they'll miss some of that backfield experience for sure. Yeah. But
no Rob Carney.
No Rob Carney as well.
Sorry, I was looking on for the Force.
Yeah.
No more Rob Carney in this competition is obviously a very sad thing for all of us.
Indeed.
The Brumbies are going to host the Force on Sunday.
Yes.
Sunday afternoon game. The Brumbies looking pretty stacked themselves.
They are.
Slipper, Felau Faianga, Alan Alatoa as a test level front row.
It is.
Darcy Swain in behind them as a lock. Rob Valatini, Pete Samu makes for a very meaty pack, perhaps the meatiest in Oz. Nick White and Noel Olasio as well. That partnership going to be given more time to foster with Irai Simoni and Len Ikitau in the midfield.
That's good.
And a back 3 of Muirhead, Wright and Banks, all internationals.
Good to see Tom Banks back as well. Last time we saw him, he took a nasty knock at test level. But
also Jesse Mogg is back in the fold.
He is, after 10 years away, he's back in their fold, which is hilarious, and fair play to him, to be fair.
The Force, as always is the way, have picked up some interesting talent. They've got Santiago Medrano, the tight head, still in there trying to lock down things at scrum time. Isaac Rodda they've picked up to try and bulk up that pack. Then they've got a new 10, Reece-Jan Pasitoa, who's 20 years old, and we'll see how he goes. They also got Mataele, who was playing on the wing for the Crusaders for quite a while. He's a good player himself.
Yeah, they have Kai
Tony Pulo on the wing.
Yeah, Kai Tu'u, the hooker, who got capped for the Wallabies last year as well. He's in their ranks. So, some good qualities in there, and we do like the Force on this podcast, to be honest. We're kind of little pet rooters for them, ever since they got jilted out of that Super Rugby series. It's great to see them
and
back.
Before, they were the team with Matt Hodgson and Nick Cummins. They were the most likeable team.
All those Honey Badger viral interviews from yesteryear. The Force are great, and it's just the other side of Australia. It's nice to see some representation over there. It felt a little bit just a little bit harsh when they were outed from Super Rugby.
I still won't forgive them because they ended that team, and they will never get that team back. With them. That was a great hustling team.
That's true.
But anyway,
but hopefully they can go well under Tim Sampson's management this year. But Super Rugby Pacific to get underway this weekend after much kind of push and pull and a lot of disruption. Fair play to the tournament organisers and all the teams. There's been disruption, there's been compromise, but they are going to stay on schedule and get this underway.
As far as a winner, are you looking past the Crusaders? I mean, the Blues are set to have Bowden Barrett and Rico Ioane and all of this quality.
Yeah, well, it's an unusual.
Caleb Clark is back for the Blues as well. Like
it's an unusual tournament in that there are 3 champions going in as of last year. You have the Reds, Oz champions, you have the Crusaders, Kiwi champions, and you have the Blues as Trans-Tasman champions as well. So those 3 are probably contenders, but I'll say the Crusaders. You don't go very far betting against the Crusaders in these comps.
How far are the Brumbies and the Reds, do you reckon, from mixing it with the
not as far as the Trans-Tasman stuff suggested initially, whereby like the week after their very climactic final they had to go away to play the Crusaders away from home and stuff, and you just end up looking it doesn't look good, even though I feel they can give a better raffle. Those 2 teams in particular can give a better
snowballed
raffle.
on them for a number of reasons. Partly because the Kiwi teams were only playing 2 big games. As they were doing the inter-country ones, they knew that Reds and the Brumbies were the games to target.
Send out their bees against the other lot. The Waratahs as well were nowhere last year. Hopefully they've improved. But it was just a tougher task in that Trans-Tasman format for those two teams, especially after quite a physical Oz final. Like that final was bruising, and like Tupou did 80 minutes in it, and you're like, there was a big barnstorming, emotionally draining win that ultimately then they had to back up by going away to the Crusaders and the like, and it's tough. So no, hopefully they can mix it and get a few Kiwi scalps this year, and hopefully we're hoping that the new franchises Fiji and Drua and Moana Pacifica manage to get some tries on the board first and get some wins on the board overall. If each team in the comp can get a win on the board, I'll be a happy man. And not a 28-0 walkover COVID victory either. Proper win.
No question. But with that, we will move on. And we're going to look now at the rugby news of the week, as we always do to round out the show. And we'll start with some up in the air, complex future of rugby kind of news, which I know we love to get into. Some fatalistic, who knows what the future will bring kind of news. So it starts with the pleasant news that the Springboks are going to continue to compete in the Rugby Championship and are totally committed to that competition. They announced delightfully today until 2025.
Yes, caveated slightly by that, mitigated slightly. Like total commitment until a few years.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the announcement that they made today, which did raise the eyebrows a little bit. And then, interestingly enough, the Daily Mail in the UK has reported a big exclusive blockbuster, and this is the bloody Daily Mail.
Yes.
Like, can you trust them?
Well, they've cited sources.
They very well-placed sources in the Daily Mail allegedly have led them to publish this story saying that South Africa are set to replace Italy in the Six Nations from 2025 in a seismic move for rugby's global structure, with investor CVC a driving force behind the idea after buying a big £365 million stake in the competition in recent years.
It all sounds very plausible, but what are they basing this on?
Well, it's interesting. Like, they're talking about their sources, and they didn't go into enough detail, frankly. I was just reading through their piece, but they were talking about that it seems to be that, first of all, the Springboks are going for this. The CVC, the owner, have the ownership stake, that they're behind it.
Board.
I think the other unions are on board, and the question mark lingers over Italy. And they're saying, like, their sources say that Italy will leave the tournament as the most likely scenario rather than a 7-team expansion, which, is interesting, except how that worked. Like, how are
Italy have an ownership stake?
Yeah, I thought they did. But I'm not. Maybe they can be voted
can they be
out,
bought out or voted out. I don't know.
Or forced out, or kicked out, or burned out.
Yeah, I don't know.
They don't go into enough detail in explaining how that would work.
Yeah.
Can they just do that?
They can't just do that. There's a lot of red tape in between.
And
in the meantime, the only thing that is confirmed is that the Springboks have signed on with Sanzar till 2025, and it feels like a little bit of this might be spin, might be conjecture.
Might be jumping the gun a little bit.
Might be jumping the gun. Even if it ends up being the case that it plays out that way, I think there's just a lot between now and getting to that as a confirmed thing or as anything to report on, but it definitely is the rumour mill circulating, and it was partly because of that 2025 thing, total commitment until 2025.
Well, and presumably this prompted the Daily Mail to ask some questions, to which they got these answers from potentially, I would guess, sources inside South Africa rugby who are probably well placed enough to know what the plan is, but might not be as abreast as even they think they are on what can legally be done.
Yeah, indeed. Because as much as they may want that to happen, and there may be a sizable amount of the rugby watching world who would welcome that over, another blowout win over Italy. But
could you imagine if the Springboks were part of a Six Nations and there was no Italy and no break week? There'd never be another Grand Slam ever.
It would be very, very
Could
tough.
you imagine winning a Grand Slam in that competition? 5 weeks, 5 wins against, from Ireland's point of view, the Springboks, England, France, Wales, Scotland.
Yes.
5 weeks, 5 wins. That's insane.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing that. But yeah, no, it would be exciting. We spend every week giving out about how the Italy game isn't adding anything, and we're also talking about how Italy are in effect a tier 2 team.
Yes.
Does this make sense? If you were drawing up...
look at Rugby Europe, are the Holland games achieving anything in that comp either? If you could replace the Dutch with an Italy, then that's a barnstorming tournament all of its own too.
But then obviously you're not going to have any promotion relegation, but then you aren't anyway. You don't have it anyway. So again, you go back to our point about the autumn window, which probably brings us on to this other point, other story that's also doing the rounds, is about this revival of this idea that won't die, the World Nations Championship. 3 years after the concept failed amid promotion relegation fears, but also other things. But the chief executives of the 10 biggest unions are said to be close to agreeing on the structure of new competition.
Fidgy-widginess in terms of citing things.
Yes,
people
they are said. That leaves you a bit of wiggle room.
They're
said to be close to agreeing on the structure of a new competition to be held every 2 years from 2024.
Presumably the 2 years outside of the World Cup for the
Lions Tour.
Indeed.
The Lions Tour and World Cup would remain untouched, but this stuff would go on. So again, I don't see any real differences to what they proposed a couple of years ago.
There are certain things that are going to change what the big impasses were. It seems a very similar proposal to the one that was shot down for very obvious reasons.
And again, it's two 12-team divisions, which is
bewilderingly bad format. To be honest,
indeed.
Really annoying. The fact that a bunch of heads will put together and come up with that instead of a simple 4-team tournament that goes 10 divisions deep or 5 divisions deep and happens all in the current November window. Stop messing around. The global calendar is just an oxymoron that makes no sense. It's summer over it. We were just previewing Super Rugby. It's going to be summer rugby down there. It was raining in Paris last week. It's
going to be autumn rugby. I mean, their season starts season-wise the same time ours does.
Yes,
because that's
the nature of the globe and of the seasons. I don't understand.
But then again, South Africa are now looking to join the party, and the other factor, if they join the Six Nations, would be the high summer factor of their home games.
It would be a huge factor.
When would even someone win in South Africa if that happened? I don't know, but the format's going to be these two 12-team divisions. So basically, it would be the Six Nations, the Rugby Championship teams, and then Japan and Fiji. And it's Georgia, you're down the other end, and you'll see you next year, and you might get one game at the end of the year against Japan, and that's it for you playing tier 1 teams. It does nothing for tier 2 teams. This is the exasperating thing, is that they hype up the competitive edge that this is going to give a promotion or relegation, which is it basically ring fences. They're never going to play tier 1 teams. Changes the whole window inexplicably. Has a lot of the same teams playing each other more often.
When the Gulf
does away with the international tours. Everything about it just smells of garbage, and also there's also just the total disregard for the club season as they wedge it into their global calendar plans, which, as you rightly point out, you in various kind of rugby talking platforms, as we as rugby nerds find ourselves listening to, you invariably hear someone at the table just go, and I think we do need to get a global calendar. I mean, it's past due. I think we all need to get on the same calendar in rugby. It just has to be done. It's nobody ever expands on that point. It's hey, why? Why do we need that? What would be different? What would be so great about having a global calendar? Somebody make that point to me, because I don't understand it. You're just upheave everything to get this global calendar. And the other thing is, they all want it to be by the Southern Hemisphere structure. Starts in January, ends in November, or starts in February, ends in November. So this is basically doing away with winter rugby in the Northern Hemisphere. I just think it's
ridiculous.
It
comes from a bad place at the beginning, and then the actual expanding upon it is even more moronic. And I just don't understand how these ideas get as far as they do before they ultimately get shot down, which I believe this will be as well. The pushback from the Six Nations is real, and it's a problem on the macro growth of the game style thing, but in some instances like that, it's quite a good fast track to shut down stupid ideas right out the gate.
One of the other footnotes they have in this report on it is player welfare issues would be also an ongoing worry amid the possibility of playing multiple test matches in different time zones across consecutive weeks,
which, as we've learned from the Argentina experiment, doesn't equate to good rugby.
No, it's too tough. Even for Argentina, it can be too tough. You need the gap weeks, and you need to set up your base camps and everything. It just, I think this was a Wales Online report I'm reading, and they were citing a Wales tour in 2004 where they faced Argentina in Buenos Aires and South Africa in Pretoria on consecutive weekends. and naturally enough on the game in Pretoria shipped 53 points and looked as if they hadn't slept for 3 days that week, because they probably hadn't.
Indeed.
With jet lag and everything.
Fundamentally
so there
silly.
are player welfare issues with this as they try and cram all of their great ideas into one bucket. And the only thing I could say is that, like, these bigwigs seem to be out of their minds in terms of the probability of something like this ever passing. But they're so determined to do it, and yet they miss basic changes. And this is where we go and beat our drum. And I think if you we were on, we'll be on Brandon Smith BS Rugby's channel next week, and we were making this point to him as well. But like, this is something that I think it's our debut of making this point this season, so we should make it. But we are big advocates on this show of using for the game's expansion and the introduction of more stakes in the international season. The key is to use the November window that you have, I think, and turn it into a competition. And the Autumn Nations Cup gave us a name for that competition.
Yeah, you could maybe rebrand it, because that was a rubbish competition.
But, I like it. But I still like it. I still like it as a name,
and
I think it stops you from completely restructuring everything and allows you to get competitive, high stakes games, and with the capacity for teams to really buy into it. It's not going to be as important as the Six Nations or Rugby Championship, because how could it be? And nor should it be.
And it doesn't detract from either of them or the World Cup, because it's a different thing.
Yeah, but it's like an ongoing league situation. You can start with the world rankings. You get your 4 teams in one group, and each of those teams across 3 weeks play each other. Top team wins and trophy, and then bottom team gets relegated to the second tier, and in the second tier, top team wins, gets a trophy, and goes up to the next division for next year, and then they become a Division 1 team, and then the other team drops down, becomes a Division 2 team, and you can
likewise all the way down to Division 6, 7, where you can see Colombia play against Russia.
Even just giving the capacity for competitive games against teams of their own level to teams like Samoa, Tonga, Uruguay, Chile, but also Romania, USA, Russia,
Canada,
Spain, getting them in a mix with each other, playing each other consistently, and a path to progression, noticeable progression.
One of those teams, maybe a big game between Italy and Fiji for all the marbles, and next year they'll be up in the tier with Argentina, with Wales and someone at Scotland, and then those are 3 proper games that they'll play.
And it's just a league division. There's not like it's important to get. It's good to get your win, and you want to move up the divisions, and it's a sign of an indication of where you are as a squad. But then your place in your annual tournament isn't disrupted in that macro way either.
And it doesn't rub the bigwigs in the Six Nations, who are just going to oppose any of these changes anyway, and they're going to shut down this idea that they're proposed as well. Like it's too much power that the home nations definitely have in terms of your Augustin P show, World Rugby Revolution, bang that drum. There is truth to it, but it does help in exactly these circumstances, like this, or like that ridiculous tens thing they were flaunting about, that they can be summarily dismissed very early on in the process. But it is still bewildering how many people...
What's crazy is how persistent they've been with this. Like, the World Rugby as a body, like, they're so determined to do this, and I have no idea why. I don't see how it makes anything better. But there you go. But the only thing is that Test rugby makes a bit of money, and so cramming as much Test rugby into a calendar year as is conceivably possible seems like a good short-term solution to get more money. Except the problem is, the club game lays the foundation for the Test game. It's vital. It can't be ignored.
Indeed.
And you have there's an element of diminishing resources to this, in the sense that you can't just cram as many Test games as possible into a calendar year without
they always find
the quality of
like
them.
The CVC venture capitalists will always spearhead ambitious ideas that'll project a load of money that comes in, but it's often not like that. And we saw that with even the rebranding of the Heineken Cup to the Champions Cup, and then they were disappointed because it failed, because the projection said we'd be squillionaires by now. And it's like, no, because it's the same tournament, just with a new shiny brand on it, and you're not going to triple your income suddenly magically because the projection said so.
Indeed, stop ripping up things that work for the sake of these ludicrous chartered ambitions that no rugby fans are really actually screaming for. And maybe, if for your experimentation, just use the one window that isn't anything anyway. November window. It's not anything
too
anyway.
Many dead rubbers. And even if you were to have a circumstance which would be an impasse, it's like, well, what if England are in tier 2 and All Blacks are in tier 1, but we want to play the All Blacks? It's still only 3 games in our proposed tournament, so as people are doing now in the November window in a cash grab, you can schedule a 4th game, and you can have that be England be New Zealand or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not an upheaval at all. So I think that's certainly our idea. We're going for it, and we're
trying to push it because
we're never going to stop pushing it. We might even put it to writing one day, our proposal, and submit it to World Rugby, because the fellas are going off the deep end.
They are with their attempts to redraw things. Like the tens thing, where it's like, what if we just annex a load of players from all club footy and have a tens tournament somewhere?
I don't think that was World Rugby's idea. To be fair, I think that was some mad group.
But the madness of these ideas and how far they get, that they end up published for us to scrutinise.
Every few months or so, somebody comes up with one. But the fact that World Rugby keeps spearheading this does worry me.
It does.
But anyway, for the time being, rugby's going to remain as it is.
With
for better or
Springboks
worse
in the Southern Hemisphere, and with Six Nations as is, and with the November window as dead rubbery as ever, and no global calendar because meteorology and physics and the seasons.
Absolutely. But we're going to park all that chat for now, although doubtless not for the year.
Not forever now.
Indeed. But we also wanted to just discuss there's been confirmation about the Currie Cup First Division, the second tier of Currie Cup. Zimbabwe have confirmed their schedule, and they are going to play in it from March to June.
The Go Shocks team, is it?
And it's going to work out well for them, because the African World Cup qualifiers are in July, so it's a great chance for Zimbabwe to get a pre-season run.
And that's going to be just semi-final, isn't it? That African Nations thing. So that's going to be seriously. You need to be arriving to the pitch or you're going home. So
and Black Lion are also going to compete in that. The Black Lion, who are having this competition in the Super Cup that's like a game every now and then. But plenty of time to fit a Currie Cup campaign in the interim. So that's exciting too.
Judging by the Currie Cups last few years.
That's true. Then we also have news from Argentina, which is basically just a report at this stage, nothing official,
nothing confirmed as of Wednesday. We're shooting this,
the front runner for the head coach job is now Felipe Contepomi, Leinster's backs coach,
attack and backs coach,
Puma's legend, and Leinster legend, all round legend. Felipe,
Dr. Phil.
We're always big fans of his. But that's according to the latest information, apparently from Buenos Aires, is that he'd be in pole position because he's basically easy to get. And the other one they're headhunting is Quesada, who has obviously led the Jaguares to Super Rugby.
Great pedigree, that was fantastic. And now he's doing good work with Stade Francais. They just beat Toulouse last week, so to Stade Francais looking good. I think they're 9th or something in the top tours, or 8th. They're in that hunt. So two very good former 10s for Argentina, and you can see they're trying to look in a different direction from the former front rower.
The suits definitely saw what they were looking at over the last year, particularly, and went
with the amount of talent in their backline and the good rugby that their sevens team are playing and stuff. There's no reason for them to not run the ball a hell of a lot better than they did this season.
No question.
And a former 10 attacking style coach is what they're going to have anyway, whichever way they go. And I think it is a shrewd acquisition either way.
Yeah, I mean, personally,
I prefer Quesada.
I would if I was in the.
And it's not just Leinster. Let me keep Felipe thing. It's I'm not fully convinced of our attack when we're missing our Tyg Fairlongs and our Johnny Sextons and stuff. And he's been the attack coach for the last couple of years. He's only the attack coach. He's not head coach, and it's a big step up going from that limited responsibility and that shared responsibility, because Leinster is very much a committee effort a lot of the time.
Indeed, Ledesma was the most well-meaning guy in the world, but when he got the head coach job, it was his first head coach job, and he was out of his depth. I don't think getting another first-time head coach is a good idea. If I was in charge,
has more of a pedigree and more of a track record.
Going all out to get Quesada if they can from Stade Francais. I'm not sure what the position is financially, whether they're in a position to do that.
The thing is that he is within contract and unwilling to yield on it, which is what has Felipe as the front runner, is contract related issues for Quesada.
Indeed, but they really should make an effort of it, and they should probably get Horcad back involved as well, because he's sprinkling his juju on everyone else. He may go back and spring it to his original home stars. Toulon also announced that Eben Etzebeth is going to be leaving the club at the end of the season. They've really fallen out with Eben. He obviously they've grown tired of seeing him in the physio room getting massages. And then coming out for the occasional amazing performance.
Which he did at the weekend. But
he, to be fair, apparently it was his decision. He wants to go back to South Africa, and the Sharks front runners to sign him.
Sharks headhunting quite a lot, but that would be a serious acquisition. It is unfortunate for Toulon, and they have barely had any Cheslin Colby to work with either this season. So
they're a little frustrated.
And at the bottom of the table, and the Springboks are just not playing any games for them.
That's what you get. Gail Fiku came out of your academy.
Why is he
silly? Do you feel
indeed?
now?
Why don't you have him in there? You dumb. Yeah, indeed.
Indeed, that's your business model. You get what you pay for when you go for mercenaries.
Just mercenaries. But they're not loyal. Of course they're not loyal. They're mercenaries. So,
you built your club around it. It got you some Champions Cups, so don't be complaining.
Yeah.
But he's basically the Shark CEO Edward Coetzee was basically saying that they'd be hoping they want a lock, and they're obviously hoping to get Etzebeth. But they're also saying that his salary at Toulon is almost a third of the salary cap in South Africa for a team.
Yes.
So we'll see if they can make that work.
Can they manage to stretch that? He'd like to go, but sometimes it might not add up. But that's just the crazy money that is, and that is Toulon's model. And if they have gripes, too bad.
Change your model, you know. Also, news coming out of South Africa that Stormers fullback Warwick Gallant looks set to fill the void that Teddy Thomas will leave when he heads to La Rochelle at the end of the season. Gallant is reported to be joining Racing, the Parisians, on a big salary, €450,000 a year, and good for him. Great signing for Racing. I always think the South Africans you want are the ones who are right next to the Springbok team, like
not starting
right
Springboks, because
they'll
so
be available. Close. Well, he'll be available, but also he's got a point to prove. A bit like Esterhazen in Quins. Esterhazen, I think, will be a Springbok at some point, and I think Gallant will be too. I think he's the natural successor to Willie le Roux. Whenever
plays a similar game, very tidy fullback, very assured, skillful,
lovely player. He's gonna do wonders for them in Racing. I think that's a great signing.
Yes, indeed, and plugging a gap that was left. Obviously, Zebo left last year from them, and now Teddy Thomas at the end of the season. So they're in the market for someone like that, and it is a shrewd signing. Other contract news from Ireland, actually, Tadhg Byrne has agreed a contract extension with the IRFU and with Munster, so he will stay with Munster until 2025, until Springboks join the Six Nations. Byrne obviously established himself over the last few years, not in the Scarlets initially, but obviously in the Ireland setup now. He's won 27 caps, and he's already earned selection for British and Irish Lions tour in South Africa. So he's been on a pretty meteoric rise, although he did struggle last week against the French. But good to see him sign on, and Munster could do far worse than having him.
Still kicked a 50-22 in that French game.
So he's all skill. He's a great rugby player, more so than whatever position you pick him. He's just a fantastic rugby player, great to watch.
Oh, totally. Big Tadhg Byrne fan, great signing. Leinster and the IRFU have also confirmed that Leo Cullen, head coach, is going to stay put after agreeing to a 1-year contract extension. He was signed on to 1 year last year during COVID times.
I think that has been their policy during COVID, is just all they can afford, which is reasonable, but I'd expect that the extension will now be agreed upon. It's agreed upon up beyond 2023, but could be agreed upon more if silverware comes.
He's been a good few years in the job now, since 2016, so he's delivered for I think 4 URC/Pro 14s and Champions Cup. Pretty solid return. But
he wants more. They want more this season, to be honest.
If they go trophyless this year, or even I know the URC is about to get very competitive with the South African teams, but even so, I think for Leinster it's all about Europe.
It definitely is.
They've made 1 European final and lost. They made 2 European finals, won 1, lost 1. I think certainly making another European final is on the major to-do list for Leinster. They want to be at the dance at the end of the year. Then there's good news out of Harlequins as well for Quins fans. Their trifecta of young, exciting coaches, Nick Evans, Adam Jones, Jerry Flannery. Adam Jones taking scrum, Jerry Flannery taking line out on defence, Nick Evans taking attack.
It's really good balance. I like it.
It's great.
I like it.
They've been awesome. And they're signed unspecified length, but they've all signed on new deals to continue on at the club. I think the new coach who came in at the end of the year, Tobias Matson, he's now the head coach figurehead, except he was just saying the foundation that's there is just incredible, and basically they're just a cohesive group, and he's sort of tinkering here or there, but not disrupting
anything.
The brilliance of these guys who took over the team after Paul Gustard left mid-season last year amid a tumultuous time, and took them to the Premiership title. I mean, they're a very exciting little trifecta.
They are. Good brains trust. And like a good little microcosm of rugby in the mid-aughts as well. You have Jerry Flannery, you have Big Adam Jones, you have Nick Evans. Those guys are all legends in their own right in their playing career. And it's a good little kind of trifecta of different aspects of the game that are well covered. It could coalesce it's already coalesced into a very effective unit, and hopefully Quins can roll on. The other news, Scott Lawrence has been appointed defence coach for the USA Eagles for the 2022 test season. The announcement comes less than a month after the 46-year-old resigned as head coach and general manager of Rugby ATL. For many, the move was expected following Lawrence's decision to step away from the MLR and from ATL. He's one of their most decorated coaches in terms of the US thing, so it's nice to kind of get him into the fold, and they definitely need restructuring at the top level.
And they definitely need better defence. And this guy, to be fair, like ATL got to final last year, he was their head coach, and
they were quite a gritty team. They did defend pretty doggedly.
And he was involved in the USA Eagles coaching setup for a 2-year stretch from 2017 and 2018, which, if you'll recall,
they were looking good.
They peaked in 2018.
Good.
So definitely a good guy to get back involved. And I am still rooting for the US in the background to get better.
Get better first. I'm rooting for Chile to knock them out of the World Cup.
I know you are,
because I think they don't deserve it. But I think they should get better.
A couple more signing newses and player newses to talk about. JJ Hanrahan has signed a long-term contract with the Dragons, going to be in the URC from next season. Move to Clermont just hasn't worked out at all. He's actually made 150 club appearances during his career. Obviously, he had 2 spells with Munster, a stint in Northampton. He's been a little bit around the block. Clermont this season.
Two-time URC winner, which is good pedigree as well. British and Irish Cup winner 2 times as well, and 2-time Golden Boot winner in the URC, which is one of those end-of-season awards, but he's managed it twice.
Well, indeed.
29 years old, probably a good acquisition for Dragons, for a club in that position, just to have him on their books to guide them through a little bit. I
struggling a little for form, to be honest.
I thought it was not a shrewd signing that Clermont made. I just don't think he matched up well with Clermont Auvergne at all as what they needed. But hopefully this move can be good for him, and good for the Dragons, and good for all involved.
Yeah,
so good luck to JJ.
Then we have Mark Wilson, the England flanker. He's retiring from rugby with immediate effect, unfortunately. That's confirmed by Newcastle on their website. He had a meniscus tear in his knee.
So underwent surgery, and just I think it was in the aftermath. It's like he's 32 now, and you're weighing up. Knees are always scary. It's always scary to watch them buckle and stuff, and is he going to go through the rehab and go for it again? And to be honest, his career speaks to a club man who gave it all for Newcastle. He's been with them since he came through their academy and has scored 42 tries for them in 237 games. And he managed to get 23 caps for England over the last few years. He was involved from 2017 to 2021, including featuring in the World Cup final as well, and winning the 2020 the 2020 Six Nations. So fair play to him, like a proper club man, real hard man, was a part of that Newcastle Falcons kind of core group. And good luck to him in his post-playing career. I think he's been.
Hope he stays healthy.
It's a good kind of example of just hard work, diligence, good tough man, and it gets rewards.
He's a very, very good player on his day, and he earned that place in the England squad. He was very solid number 6.
Yes, indeed. And then the last little bit of news comes out of the South Africa and the Sharks specifically again. Neil Powell, who some of you may know, he's been in charge of the Blitz box for the last few years. I think he took up the role, or I can't remember when, but it was 2014. He's been there for a while, but he's guided them to a record equaling 34 match win streak. He's obviously rinsing it right now. We were covering the Sevens a bit last year and this year, and they just look night and day different to every other team in it. Obviously, we're missing a few key players through COVID in the series, but they look the best team in it by quite a distance at the minute. And he's going to try and take them to the World Cup of Sevens, which is happening at the end of 2022. He's going to try and win that comp, and then he's going to join up with the Sharks as new director of rugby. So that is a good head in terms of South African brain drain. They're repurposing him into the Sharks, and they're looking. They
definitely seem to be leaning into the Sharks as their number 1 franchise, which makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. They were the only ones who could ever win in New Zealand and get some of those big away moments that really test your mettle. The Sharks do have a pedigree in them, and now they're kind of, if they can manage to make, that's a done deal now. But if they can manage to get Etzebeth back into the fold and other things like that, it can all
of a sudden look very Springboky,
making all of these outrageous plays from the weekend that he was doing, and they're pretty getting very good. But listen, I think that has about run us out of news and about run us out of time for today's show. So a little bit more chatty, a bit more time to just chat about stuff as we did in the show. But listen, if you did enjoy our rambling discussions, please do leave comments down below on anything that we've discussed. We'd love to hear your thoughts, especially on some of the more up in the air topics like the end of the year, the restructuring of rugby. If you've any thoughts on that, why you think
something should be some way. If you want to favour a global calendar, why?
Why, exactly. If you can leave a detailed point as to why a global calendar needs to happen, I'd love to read that, because I just don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously Six Nations action as well, Rugby Europe action as well. Who are you following in either of those comps? Are you watching from Tbilisi and happy with the weekend's results, or you're watching from Lisbon and a bit frustrated? Let us know down in the comments below.
Absolutely, yeah, indeed. And do be sure to subscribe if you enjoy the stuff. You'll get notifications for all of our videos, and be sure as well to share this with your rugby loving friends. Like the videos as best you can. And yeah, tune in next week, because we'll be back to preview round 3 of the Six Nations, round 3 of Rugby Europe, getting ready for those 2 competitions to be really heating up at that stage.
Yeah, looking forward to it. See you next week, folks.
Bye-bye.